Hi, this is Stephanie Short from the Live the Health You Want podcast, and I'm excited to be interviewing Brandon Kolb today. And Brandon was a professional baseball player, and his story is the most amazing story I've ever heard. He's endured more health issues than any one person should ever have to bear, and his journey is fascinating, and his successes are great. So I'm going to let Brandon just take it away and start talking about what went on with him.
Oh, well, that depends.
Start anywhere you want, because...
Well, I mean, if you want to start at the first signs of this, it was early childhood. Nobody knew it. It was genetic. It ran through the family in one form or another. But now that we've figured out what we figured out and gone through genetics, now we're talking astronomical odds if it really was, Parkinson's and early onset, rapid onset dementia and all this stuff with all these cognitive problems that just littered my family. So I guess if we start with my introduction to microcurrent, that was in November of 2019. And that's when, after reaching out to baseball, after I think we went back and forth with Mayo Clinic for almost a year, but I wasn't doing well at that time. I don't remember too much of exactly what happened. I just know that I was denied care at Mayo Clinic because they couldn't provide me with any care that I wasn't already receiving in Dallas. So that was kind of like the,
What were your symptoms at that point? What were you mostly affected with?
Well, at that time, we went through a couple diagnoses. The first big hit was Parkinson's in 2018.
And you were how old then?
44 at the time. So yeah, I was 44, and we got the Parkinson's diagnosis in 2018, and then, followed their protocol with dopamine patches, but also pursued stem cells to the brain.
Let me interrupt for 1 second, because there was something really interesting in your story that you've told to me, is that your mother also had Parkinson's, and part of your incredible history is that you grew up next to a plant that was using uranium.
Well, yes, so that's what I mean by early childhood.
That was your first exposure, probably.
So I was born in Pleasanton, California, which is, 6 miles down the road, a 10-minute drive from Lawrence Livermore Lab. And this was 73 to 79 when we moved to Danville, and they were working on nuclear bombs during the Cold War. That was the nuclear stockpile. It wasn't a secret. My mom's friends worked there. And there's a ton of uranium cases that are documented in and around the Bay Area.
So this is why you're growing up.
This is groundwater.
You're growing up at this point, so it's affecting.
I was underdeveloped.
Physiology.
I was undersized. I was underdeveloped. I had a brain that they couldn't figure out. I showed every single sign of nervous system dysfunction as a child. With the tics, with the oral fixation. Bedwetter. Night terrors. That was my childhood.
But at the same time, you were really a talented athlete. Like, you ran marathons at a really young age.
I wouldn't. At that age, you're not a talented athlete. It was just, I was like the Energizer Bunny. I had a motor that didn't quit. Like, that was apparent. Anything endurance, I could push it further than most. And that was, I ran a half marathon in junior high and played a soccer game later that afternoon. And, it would just, my mom was a marathon runner. I'd tag along. She had a 10-mile loop that she ran 5 days a week. So same thing. Motor that didn't stop. She waited tables at an Italian joint, so she was also on her feet for 4 or 5 hours a night. Motor that didn't, and then wake up the next morning, run 10 miles, come home, take a nap, go wait tables, and repeat.
That's amazing.
Right, and so all these similarities, the others that were apparent early on. My grandma couldn't fall asleep. She laid in bed all night long, with a headphone in her ear, plugged into a black and white 12-inch television that was on a chair so she wouldn't wake my grandpa up. Okay? My mom couldn't fall asleep unless she was sitting up in bed with the lights on, reading a book with the TV on in the background. My sister, same thing. Me, I can't fall asleep unless I'm listening to a podcast and playing hearts with a documentary on in the background.
Even now?
Even now.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's, you know,
It's
believe me, no, it comes in waves.
Right.
But I mean, no, that like last night, there was very little of that. You know, sometimes I wake up in severe pain because the shoulder pops out. Well, we haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah. Your story
So,
really
28 surgeries deep, and over a dozen of them orthopedic, where the ends of my bones are deformed, misshapen. That was from the gadolinium, which is contrast dye for MRIs.
Let's talk about
So
that
going
for a
back-
minute. That
yeah.
was pretty fascinating.
So going back to the sources, so the
Yeah.
uranium was groundwater,
was
East
one
Bay.
major.
Gadolinium, which for those that don't know, throwing a baseball 90 plus miles an hour is a very unnatural movement for the human body to make.
Many
So
times.
MRIs,
Right.
you know, when you think of MRIs and frequent MRIs, baseball's got to rank right up there with the best of them. You know, so I had my first MRI in junior high. That was a concussion paralysis on the right side for a couple hours. I was slammed to the ground in football in junior high, and that was concussion number one, and it was separated shoulder, and so they did an MRI, but we don't know if they used gadolinium because
There's no record.
right, they don't have to keep records beyond 10 years. So
Wow.
that would be one of those coin tosses. But I did have an MRI in junior high. And then I had 2 MRIs in high school, and they were both for the same thing, which was a sprained left knee. So suspected ACL tear in the left knee, the 2 years that I tried snowboarding back in the mid to late 80s, and quickly gave it up to go back to skiing because after 2 left knee scares, so
Right.
the other 2 came, and that's where I know one of them was freshman year. I don't know when the second one was. It might have been junior year. Don't think it was senior year. But anyway, those were 2 MRIs in high school. Then we had another one in junior college, which was suspected kind of impingement, right shoulder. It was mid-season, so we did an MRI. And then I had 2 more MRIs in 1997 when that was my it was my 3rd year of pro ball. And in 10 starts into the season, I felt a tweak in my elbow. And previous year had thrown 181 innings, which I think was tops in the organization for minor leagues. And then started out the next season doing great. And then boom, 1 start, 1 pitch, felt it in like the 3rd or 4th inning. They send me down to San Diego for an MRI. So they shoot the gadolinium into the elbow, and to see if it creeps through the ulnar collateral ligament. If it makes it through, it means it's a tear. That means you have to do Tommy John surgery. So if it doesn't make it through, that means you've got a partial tear, and you have the option to either rehab it or do the surgery.
Could you explain Tommy John surgery?
That's where
those that don't
replace the UCL, which is the ulnar collateral ligament.
know? Okay.
Right. So they take this little tendon right here, and cut 2 pieces, and then they patch it together like stitch work, right where the UCL is. So when it does come back, it's going to come back stronger. There's no doubt.
Oh.
But the amount of scar tissue, that's if you come back. And when I say stronger, just more durable. It's not
Uh-huh.
going to be
More powerful.
No.
Just lasts longer.
Supposedly, if you can
If
clear
it comes back.
the scar tissue, if you get range of motion back,
Uh-huh.
there's a whole lot of ifs. I didn't want to do surgery.
Right.
That was last option for me.
Right.
So I went that route, which required 2 MRIs because I went through the throwing program, and I could long toss at 300 feet, but as soon as the catcher got down and I started spinning breaking balls, it felt like. So we halted the program, did another MRI, so that was 2 doses of gadolinium in 97. And
And
then,
coming close to each other in time.
right, and so then after the second failed attempt at a rehab program, that's when they said, hey, we have a decision to make. You know, either you got to do surgery or we got to shut you down. And so take some time off. And then this winter, moved to San Diego work with Smitty, try to figure out why your elbow's hurting you, and go from there. And so that's what I did instead of surgery. And when I moved down there, we worked our way through some mechanical changes, nothing major, just some stuff that, I didn't start pitching full time until I was 18. And I didn't really have a whole lot of instruction as mechanical stuff. The guys that worked with me were great, don't get me wrong, but when you start at 18, and you have 1 year with a high school coach, 2 years with a junior college coach, 1 year with a college coach, there's no rapport.
Yeah.
There's no build.
Right.
I'm just literally learning the basics from these guys, and they did a great job with that. But it wasn't a whole lot of mechanical stuff. It was teaching me how to throw a proper curveball.
Right, and then in San Diego, you were starting to get
Right. I found my guy in Smitty.
Right.
So Smitty was my guy. He was my golfing buddy. We understood each other. There was a lot in common. But anyways, through coming back with him, the velocity, which was, it was still good. I was topping out at 95, maybe once or twice in college, but mostly 90 to 93. And then same thing, 96, 95, 96, 97. Started 97 was more creeping up to 92, 94. And then boom, the elbow. And then so when we come back, I come back, and within 2 months, of throwing with Smitty, he's like, or no, it wasn't even 2 months. Couldn't have been, because we shut it down before spring training. But he's like, hey, I like what I'm seeing, shut it down. And then when I showed up to spring training and I started to play catch, I started to have these massively erratic throws. Unexplainable.
And you felt like you couldn't control it?
Well, no, not when I'm pitching in a game. When I'm playing catch with somebody from 30 feet away.
Oh.
And I'd spike the ball into the ground. And I'd be like, what just happened to my hand? What?
You couldn't slow it down.
That's weird.
Yeah.
And then you would overcorrect and you'd throw one over their head. And you couldn't, it was like your arm wouldn't let you throw the ball slow. It's called the yips. It's well known. Okay, but I didn't know, listen, I had been wild my whole career. But wild in a sense that I was always wild. I would overthrow throws to first at any speed. But now, here I am at the professional level, and I can, when I'm going game speed, I can put the ball generally where I want it, enough to make it to the big leagues. But I was a decent AAA closer and a terrible middle reliever in the big leagues. But I couldn't do anything with finesse. And it went beyond baseball. It was the golf course. It started with the putter. I was never a great golfer, but I could, hit it 300 yards and keep it fairly straight.
It's pretty great.
And make some birdies and eagles, but, 3-putt, 6 holes and hit 2 out of bounds. But on putts inside of 3 feet, I couldn't take my putter back and simply tap the ball.
Really?
My hands would roll over and jerk the ball to the left. I couldn't stop them from doing that. It's called the yips.
Okay.
So it extended beyond baseball. So for people that think that it was nerves,
It's physical.
right.
Physical.
So the yips. If people think that yips is induced by the size of the crowd that's there, no. It happened in my batting cage when I was giving lessons to 10-year-olds as I'm underhanding baseballs to them, and my hand wouldn't allow me to throw it softly. I don't think there's anybody in my building judging me, to the point where I couldn't work anymore. So when I knew that I was toxic with metals from a recalled hip implant, in 2016, it was a recalled hip implant from Stryker. I didn't find it until December of 19, and it was recalled in 16. So lots of studying and litigation went into, there's tens of thousands of people that were, poisoned with cobalt and chromium that was from a quad metal that several companies use starting in 2008-ish, 07, 08. and was recalled in 2016 in the compound metals called tritanium, which is titanium, aluminum, cobalt, and chromium.
That's the quad metal.
That's the quad metal. And if you're leaking cobalt and chromium at elevated levels at a 3-to-1, that means you're positive. And when you look up the symptoms of cobalt toxicity, it's like vision problems, cardiomyopathy, thyroid, blood clots, vein inflammation, and I'm like, hello.
And you're already dealing with the uranium
well,
toxicity.
Right. No, there were 7 metals. There were 7 metals
7 metals.
that were found to be at toxic levels in my body. You know, which then of course led to genetics, and then, you know, Mom went through Stanford Med, then UCSF Parkinson's trials. You know, I went UT Southwestern Genetics. Michael J. Fox Foundation reached out, but that was kind of like we were already kind of off the Parkinson's train, because I, in a way, proved that it wasn't Parkinson's, but it was something.
Right.
I flew to Medellin, Colombia,
wow.
to save $15K on a functional MRI on my brain so that they can watch function in a tube and tell me what was going on, because I had been thrown in so many directions with drugs that after the stem cell procedure, I kind of wanted to know, give us a path. Because you know, the pharmacy.
So many things going on at once.
Right, we'll set aside, like maybe we'll go to it next with the pharmaceutical path that I went down, because that's frightening.
Right, maybe
You
we
know,
should have another podcast about that, because you were on so many medications.
Right. So by that time, you know, they looked at the brain, and it was everything. Think about it. I mean, they wanted every emotion. They wanted you to relax. They wanted you excited. They wanted you happy. They wanted you frustrated. They wanted you to look at puzzles. They wanted you to look at unfinished, you know, jigsaw puzzles that didn't have the right pieces that fit. Just to watch your brain connect and say, how's your brain talking to each other?
And they didn't use any dye for that. They could just see that on an MRI.
Well, we did. So that's a funny story. So we'll get to that after. But so no, you know, and it's these 2 Colombian techs that you just met that morning. That was facilitated by a friend of yours. You've never, and you get out of the tube and they just look at you and have kind of a strange look, and they're like, can we ask you what you do for a living? And I'm like, you know, I used to give baseball lessons to kids, but I had to close my business because I'm sick. And they're like, you know, your levels aren't normal, right? I'm like, that's why I'm here. And hence the closing the business because I'm sick. You know, and I remember the gist of the conversation, but this was at a time when
you were probably shocked you were walking
well,
around.
I'll make this brief. But over time, with all the bad news that I've gotten from scans, like I don't read what the doctor says to me isn't as important as how they reacted. That's all.
Okay.
That's all. And so when these guys, like I remember them looking at me kind of cross-eyed going, what the hell was that? and so I jokingly said, like, well, yeah, I mean, we're trying to figure this out. This is kind of a Hail Mary.
That's why I'm here.
Right, this is a Hail Mary, guys. I don't normally fly to Colombia and do tests. You know, I'm doing this because I feel like I need it to give me some answers to save my life. You know, and that's when I think they kind of got that. Because,
Right.
I mean, at the time, I looked horrible.
I saw you looked totally different. You
I
were
was
way, you're
swollen.
puffy.
I was sweating through my neck. And like,
you look 30 years older in the
bloated.
pictures.
And right.
You really
And
do.
so here I am doing all this stuff. And I remember them, you know, making a comment like the activity is like, you know, you put something in front of you that's supposed to elicit this, and it's times 10. Like you're overthinking everything at every turn. You're going 12 moves in every direction, you know. And then I think the functional neurologist back in Fireman said something to the tune of Jason. He goes, "You're like Jason Bourne on Adderall." Okay, but nobody gave you the playbook. So instead of walking into a room and assessing, you know, 28 different threats, you know, you're walking around wondering where the lamps were manufactured.
But you've made some comments, like when you talk about, talking with your baseball coaches, and they'll mention something you'll recall pitching to somebody 2 years ago in a specific game, the pitches that you threw and their body language.
Now
that is
really not that uncommon, believe it or not.
Okay.
But recalling the at bat and the counts and the pitch selection is one thing. How you got to that decision and how many things you were factoring in to choosing that pitch was the difference. Is that, well, when you finally get with a guy like Smitty, and he's like, why did you throw that? Or like, how do you try to throw that pitch? And then you tell him. And he'd go, okay. And then he'd watch you throw a good one. And he'd say, okay, now what do you feel like you did there? It was just the simplicity.
The way he had you look at it.
Right, and he was the only one to figure it out to where he could go, okay, hey guys, this guy doesn't pitch like us. Like, just leave him alone. Tell him to get outs. Don't tell him to try anything. No more change-ups. Don't tell him to do anything slowly. Tell him to go throw the ball as hard as he effing can at the end of the game, and just tell him to get outs. And so after after 3.5 years of trying to learn how to throw a changeup and throwing him halfway up the backstop and into the dugout and hitting Boy Scouts and hitting security guards in St. Louis during warm-ups. Oh yeah, all true stories.
Wow.
Yeah, no, the panic attacks were real. You couldn't throw the ball less than 94 miles an hour and get it within 20 feet of your target. So anyway, getting back to...
And that caused a lot of stress, so you had to deal with that as well.
So Smitty was what he did when I got to the big leagues. Very few people talk about the yips. It's taboo. If you acknowledge it, that it's real, literally other baseball players think that they will catch it.
Really?
Oh,
a lot of superstition.
It's lots of people. It's happened to catchers, second basemen. Everybody knows them. I'm not here to tell anybody else's story, but it's well known and it's gone on for decades.
Interesting.
Okay, so the solution for Smitty was, I now met his children. I think his sons were roughly in that 8-year-old range, and obviously great at baseball, And so one day, during my first or second call up to the big leagues, he called me in for early work at the stadium, which was weird. You don't normally get called in for that. But
early work at the stadium.
Well, right. Well, so you show up early to work out with a coach on something specific.
Oh, that's unusual.
Well, right. So if you're a hitter and you're doing something wrong with your swing, and you say, "Hey, Skip, or hey, coach, can we, get some." Can we get some soft toss and work on in the field instead of the cage? I want to see the ball get out there, so meet me at the field at 11. That's early work. So Smitty wanted me to come out for early work, and he brings his kid, and he puts his kid on first base, and he puts me on the mound with a bucket of balls, and he's like, okay, pick to first. Like, don't hurt my kid. Well, you can't throw it 95.
Right.
And you have to throw it accurately
and
enough.
Kid.
And you have to throw it accurately enough so an 8-year-old can catch it. And so that was his solution.
How was that?
Horrible. It was an absolute nightmare. It was terrible.
Were you able to do it?
No, I mean.
And you knew that you didn't want to hurt him.
2 out of every 5 balls thrown his direction, he could put a glove on. And the ones that he could, I threw it like a shot put from my shoulder. Well, no, you try to aim it. You try to throw it like a dart. You you can't just grip it and rip it because it's Smitty's kid, But anything you do to try to slow it down, and your hand can't. I mean, you literally can't control your fingers. Okay, and so, you look at the timing of all this, and you're like, okay. I come back in '98 after throwing with Smitty one off season, and that was the year that I made the move to the bullpen, and they just said, no more soft stuff, no more curveballs, no more changeup project, just hard fastball slider, which means you can't be a starter, you're not changing speeds, So let's put him in the bullpen, and that's when the yips, whatever. That's when the inexplicable errant throws began to get progressively worse in '98. And it just...
And when you really wanted to shine, I mean, this is your moment.
It snowballed from there.
Worse.
Well, right. So the problem is that, I'll give you an example. There was a left-handed pitcher for St. Louis that everybody will know. It's a great story. I encourage you to read his book. So it's Rick Q. Famous Yip story. Okay. And his story happened at a much more climactic level because it happened on center stage in the NL playoffs. I forget what year. But he was, if he wasn't Rookie of the Year, it was the only reason is because he wasn't up there long enough. But of course I watched intently. By that time I was like going through it. I'm like, I got it. Okay, only his was going at game speed. Like he started getting where he'd bounce it 20 feet in front of home. He'd throw it, and mine was warming up. I couldn't throw it to the catcher in the bullpen. Slowly.
Wow. So what would that, you would throw it?
Well, no. So I would find a place to warm up into a net. Like I'd sneak under the concourse down in the batting cage, and I'd, hey, what are you doing, Kolb? Oh, I'm just trying out a new grip, No, I felt like an idiot.
Wow.
And you had to basically go in, and it was, I didn't know it at the time. I had, gotta be honest, I didn't even call it anxiety. I didn't know what anxiety
meant.
meant.
What it was?
Didn't even know what anxiety meant.
Wow.
And it's like, you're told after the fact, they're like, Brandon, your body, the fear of going to the ballpark and warming up and what you did to avoid certain shit, that's like putting your body through a car wreck every night.
Wow.
Like physiologically. The adrenaline, the cortisol, the panic attacks, the inflammation that induces.
It had to be so much anxiety because you knew
Oh.
you had the talent and
and
knew you knew what to do, and you just couldn't
and
control.
the reasons for not quitting we'll go into on another day, but the drive to keep going was of course.
But that's admirable in your whole life, Brandon.
It's almost like, okay, I had very brief stints in the big leagues and some very thrilling moments to pitch against some childhood idols, like Ken Griffey Jr., Ricky Henderson, and I got to strike them out in the big leagues. Those were thrilling moments for me, and I can't watch the footage of that.
Really?
I used to watch it. Well, I have footage of most of my big league appearances that I haven't watched I haven't been able to watch in 5 years. It literally made me sick looking at my face on the mound.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. It made me physically ill, and I'm like,
Why
oh
is
my
that?
God.
And
I was like, hey boys, it's like, I have 4 children, 3 of whom can comprehend what was on, I've got a 1-year-old that wasn't around, but the 3 were watching it, and oh cool, Dad's pitching on TV. And I used to be able to watch that stuff. And after learning what happened and what I was going through, at the time, meant I can't see myself in that kind of condition and go, I'm comfortable with this. I'm like, oh my God. I was fucking terrified. And not of Ken Griffey Jr. That Ken Griffey Jr. would hit a little dribbler back to me and I'd have to throw it to first.
And that was the problem.
That was the fear.
Slow it down to first.
You can't avoid.
So you were throwing a pitch to first base.
I had to avoid.
No.
I couldn't throw the ball around the infield. I think my fielding percentage was, I made more errors than I did successful putouts in my short time in the big leagues, and had wild throws on intentional walks, where the catcher's just supposed to step to the side and you throw it nice and easy. The catcher comes out to the mound and he's like, hey, I think we're going to put him on here. And I'm like, please no. I was like, why don't you just set up outside and I'll throw him 4 straight sliders and I'll dot your glove. Just do that. Let's not do this. And sure enough, 4th one goes over his head to the backstop. Oh, you know it. You cannot complete the task of going anything less. I've been in car wrecks, pretty bad ones. I've been in a lot of traumatic incidents. Afterwards, you're not thinking clearly. Like the police officers, give you a pen and you try to, and you can't operate the pen.
Right.
Well, it's the
You're
same
in
thing.
shock.
Well, it's
You're
the
kind of in shock.
So after games, when I would
You
pitch,
put
or
yourself in such a state.
if I would get up in the bullpen, if they even got me up to get loose, okay, or I pitched in the game, I could not sign a kid's autograph
Really?
because I couldn't hold a fucking Sharpie
Wow.
and write my name.
That's amazing.
I didn't know that
But you
at
didn't.
the time, and so another link, another specific example of that happening was everybody knows about the case for MLB guys and other sports flying out to California because we weren't informed of our healthcare benefits post-career. It wasn't California deemed that they didn't do a good enough job letting us know what we were entitled to after we were done playing. So everybody flew out to California for a bunch of doctor's appointments. At the time, I think my first trip out there, I want to say it was like 33, 34. And I went out to meet my attorneys. And at the time, I'm pretty healthy, playing golf, working 5-6 hours a day on my feet, training kids, active, just with the lumbar pain, the stiffness that came from baseball, but a functioning human being.
Were you in pain all the time then?
Well, yes, I mean, chiropractic care was
Mhm.
normal,
Mhm.
deep tissue massage, acupuncture hadn't really started by then, but it wasn't shortly after. But the pain was, it was a high maintenance program. It was cryo. It was all that stuff. And like my chiropractor was one of my dear friends, who took care of me, and Dr. Taylor and his wife Christy, they were involved in my life from 2005 to 2021 when we moved to Steamboat.
So Brandon, at that time you had no idea you had mental
No,
toxicity?
none whatsoever.
None at all.
Uh-uh.
So, because everything you're saying could totally be that.
Well, right.
Toxicity of the metal.
That's the whole thing,
Exactly.
is that when you go back and you find out what you're toxic with when you were exposed to it,
Right.
and you look at the symptoms, not only in you, but your sister, your mom, and your grandma, to the point that when you start lining up the odds that all four of us have these same cognitive, like severely rare neuropathic, my mom was Parkinson's, then progressive supranuclear palsy.
Wow.
I was Parkinson's because of my imbalanced DAT scan, and then I was Parkinsonism with polyneuropathy. My sister was manic bipolar, personality disorder, all went through the RX gamut just like me, and then my grandma, which, hey, you know what? You're absolutely right. Grandmas get dementia. That is what happens. Okay,
So you don't-
but the
it's
dementia,
accepted.
but the dementia came on fast, and it came on hard right after her metal knee replacements were put in. Okay, and now I know for a fact that I have a genetic mutation, the MTHFR gene, variant A1298C, that 7% of the population has. A much larger percentage has the MTHFR gene, but there's several different variants.
Okay.
Okay, so I know I have that variant, okay, which makes the body's cells store metals longer than other people, and sometimes doesn't let them go at all.
So basically, you don't excrete the
I
metal.
don't. My cells store it. We know that, okay?
And
But
yeah.
like 4 to 6 weeks, all these cobalt toxicity patients, all of them, okay, they had data, and we went in, and it's like, okay, great. I'm toxic with cobalt. We know where it's coming from. We can get the hip out. Well, what about the cobalt, people? Oh,
In the cells. It's
in
already
4
in
to
the
6
cells.
in 4 to 6 weeks, it works its way out. Okay, that's good. That was 2020.
So
And
that
so that's what I'm
then.
told. Right. So 6 months later, we do a test. We're already doing chelation for the other metals, and I don't know. It was 6 months later, still there, but it was reduced by 2/3. Hey, we're heading in the right direction. Okay, and then
Gives you hope.
6 months later, the day of, on March 11th, which was the day I got it out, March 11th, 2020, which was the day the world flipped upside down for COVID. I'm sitting in a vacuum-sealed protective hospital room, just having got my poisonous hip taken out, you know. And
That same day.
That same day. And
oh my
we
God.
canceled our spring break trip to Tahoe to go look for a home because my wife saw that COVID was getting bad in Sweden before here. She's from Sweden, so she's like, hey, this is going to get bad. They're going to shut down flights. I'm like, you're crazy. I'm like, my hip's coming out on March 20th. I'm not canceling another vacation because of me. We're doing this. And she's like, no, it's going to get bad. Call the surgeon and see if he can do it now because they're going to cancel all non-life-threatening surgeries. And if you don't get that out of you, you're going to go nuts. And so she talked me into it, and we rushed it, and we got it done on...
Thank goodness. It would have been another year.
Oh yeah, no. I owe her a horse. Apparently I told her I'd buy her a horse. I said if they end up canceling all the surgeries. So anyway, I owe my wife a horse. And so I got it out that day. And
how long were you in the hospital after that?
Not very. They tried to get me out of there as quick as they could.
So they put in a new one without the
Well, right. So going in, they didn't put me in the vacuum sealed room because of COVID. They put me in there because I had no immune system.
Oh.
Like I couldn't take antibiotics for the surgery because of all the. It was 7 metals. It was 7 metals, 5 molds, 2 pesticides, and microplastics that were at toxic levels in my cells. And so
the fact that you survived that is a testimony to the strength of your human body. That's amazing. So in order to undergo a surgery, you had to give them your vitals. You had to, my O2 was hovering between 88, that'd be low, but it was like in that 89 to 92 range. So that was an issue. And we had 7 clots total, but they had to close down the veins in my legs from groin to ankle permanently with foam and lasers because my heart wasn't strong enough to push the blood from my extremities, and that's kind of where I was pooling. Wow.
So that was November of 19. I had to push back my trip to get my first microcurrent treatments right around that time. Once again, not having any idea about the metals at this point. The only gut instinct I had on the metals was sometime during that summer, I saw, it was insomnia. By that time it was, seriously, I know it's endless. Right, a normal day for me was 22, 23 hours day bed. I was making probably half of the doctor's appointments that I was supposed to be at, either because I forgot them or I couldn't be that far away from a toilet, or my wife had to drive one of our 3 children somewhere and my hands didn't feel like they could operate a steering wheel.
So you couldn't always
sometimes
drive?
Well, right. So sometimes there's a number of times driving where I'll get halfway to a lunch date, thinking, okay, I'm going to stay in bed all morning and really rest up for this lunch date up the street.
You had to think like
and then I'm going to take a shower to wipe all this stink off and take a cold shower to wake me up, and then I'm going to meet my buddy at lunch. And then halfway to lunch with your air conditioner on full, it should be freezing, and you're sweating through your clothes, and your face starts to puff up.
Now at this point, were you chelating?
No.
You didn't even know about it yet.
This is what led up to.
It led up to it.
This is what life was like before microcurrent and even knowing about the metals.
Okay.
So during that time, I called an attorney. I was up in the middle of the night and I saw this hip case, and it's like kind of like those Camp Lejeune commercials, where it's like, hey, if you've had this hip implant and blah 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 blah.
And so
I wrote down
I
wrote down the 800 number, but by that time, we had already been through so many hospitals and doctors. I'm like, if that was it, like for sure we would have found that by now. Like, for the love of God, that can't be it, right? And so I called in it, I wrote it down, and I don't know, a month later, I ended up calling the attorney. And the attorney's like, well, where's your surgery report? What kind of hip was it? I'm like, I don't fucking know. Who knows that? Who knows? So,
Right, exactly.
so I go, where do I get that? And
You
he's
see
like,
it
well,
in
if
the
you
box
don't have the
somewhere.
surgery report, you know, you call the surgeon and see if they have it on record. And you call the surgeon, and that's where I'm not going to mention any names.
Right.
But it's pretty clear to me what happened. Because you call the surgeon and they make it very difficult to get the surgery report.
Of course.
They won't just send it to you. They won't let you DocuSign something to authorize the travel of that. And then you go to the office. Well, you need to make an appointment. You need to speak with this. And it's like...
Oh, they really put you off?
Right. And so I ended up going to the hospital, which, look, I was dysfunctional at the time. I mean, you got to understand, putting this together was not a normal process. It was like I was getting lost, and would forget going to the movies with my kids on a Friday, and I'd ask them to go again on a Tuesday, all excited that I felt good enough to go to the movies again, and they're like, Dad, we just saw that on Friday.
And you have no recollection?
I'm like, no, that was
That's
the I'm like, this is the sequel. Like, no, I know you guys have seen the other one. They're like, no, remember, like, Milo threw up halfway through? I'm like, I don't. No, I mean,
That
you're
had to be
losing
very
time.
frustrating.
You're
That would be
losing,
so
well,
frustrating.
you're up for 48 hours at a time.
So you're exhausted.
You're pacing through the house, trying not to wake up your family. And then when you finally sleep, it's like you sleep for 2 or 3 hours, and then you're up for 2, and then you sleep for 5. You know, there is no rhythm to anything. And so you can't plan your days. You can't say, yes, I can make it to that doctor's appointment at 10 a.m. on Thursday. Okay, well, at 9 a.m. on Thursday, I might be ready to get my first sleep for the first time in 48 hours.
And you don't even know.
Right.
So the level of stress has to
There
be
you
like
go.
here all
Like,
the time. Has to
I
be high all
cannot
the time.
promise you that I can be there for that appointment, because I might have something that's more crucial to my health than that appointment right now. That was basically what it boiled down to. Like, I'm not comfortable shitting myself in the car on the way to the doctor.
In fact, you gotta think like that. That's
I'm
a
vomiting.
tragedy.
Well, I'm vomiting every day. You know, and if I'm not vomiting every day, it's because I didn't eat any solid food that day, and I was down to soup and bread.
So this was
Something
prior to
to
having the
this.
hip joint removed?
Yes, this was
Okay.
like summer. This was spring, summer, and fall of 19, where it got to the point where, you know, suicide was on the table. Absolutely. 3 young boys. My mom just died the previous year after the 2 older boys, Crosby and Junior, watching her deteriorate to a mummy sitting in a wheelchair that had, you know, skin that looked like leather and a face that didn't move, and wearing diapers to the point where they were afraid of her. And I was diagnosed with not PSP, but another neuropathy, you know, Parkinson's sister, let's call it, if you will. And I just get diagnosed with that. You know, it's,
It had to be
Well,
unbelievable.
what am I gonna, like, I find myself wanting to be a good role model for my boys, but I'm screaming at them on 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon for bouncing on the trampoline outside my window in my bedroom and waking me up, because it's the first time I've gotten to sleep in however, who knows however long. Well, what am I doing here?
Right.
Like, why am I here?
It had to be
like,
so
whoa.
frustrating.
Well, right. And at the time, you're like, people, can you not see that my health comes, like, I'm dying. Like, this is, you know. That's where you were. So it was, what way do I go out? Do I keep yelling at my kids for doing what they're supposed to be doing? Do I, you know, put a 9 in the temple and go down by the creek, so, you know, leave a note so make sure my wife finds me? Well, but I mean, if you're not bringing anything to the table at that point, and you feel like, you're like, listen, when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I did what they told me. Okay, I did their dopamine patches, but I also did stem cells. I already did stem cells in my shoulder in 2014 and felt the effects of them. So when my pain management doc, who's been taking care of me, and yes, the same doctor, Dr. Jerry Hollybeck, who prescribed me opioids, and gave me cortisone shots and nerve blocks and rhizotomies, is a compassionate man, despite the fact that, you know, he was the one giving me I needed him. I'm bone on bone in every joint. My ligaments and tendons are calcified. I should be in a shitload of pain.
Right.
Okay? And he did what he was taught to get me out of pain. And he would meet me at clinic in closed hours and take care of me so I wouldn't miss a day of work. So I was trying to work through all this as I was
Right.
falling apart.
Wow.
And not seeing it in myself. So as I'm here fighting for my mother with like stem cells and all this stuff, not realizing that it was happening to me until 2018 when I got my Parkinson's. That's why we were at a
That'd be
neurologist.
so ironic.
Well, that's why we were at a
Yeah.
neurologist in the first place. We had been fishing for me for a while with no answers. You know, lots of weird stuff was happening.
Right.
You know, full hormonal replacement, thyroid, hypothyroid, hyperthyroid, I fucking forget. I think I was both at one point. I mean, no, the roller
Sounds like
coaster ride. So all the
Right.
levels were just doing things that they couldn't explain. And so I was on regulatory stuff on and off since we tried to get pregnant with our third back in 2011. And so I went from being fine having our second to trying to have our third. Doc says sperm counts 0. 0. Like not low, but 0. After we just had Crosby. And he's clearly mine because he's my only mini-me. My wife is faithful. And it's like, and then it's the thyroid. And then they're looking at it and they're like, okay, well, let's get you on. And that's when the labs started. So we were checking the liver, we were checking the test levels, and we started monitoring. And it was not only, it was testosterone, it was growth hormone, it was estrogen blockers, it was thyroid meds.
All your hormones were out of whack.
And it was, right, they were, so
Everything
they,
out of
in
whack.
other words, they took over hormonal control. They took over, you know,
You started doing replacement.
running labs and then adjusting levels for what came back on the labs, which is a process that
They still didn't find the cause. They
listen,
still-
I'm not an educated man, but I feel like I'm pretty smart when it comes to my case and like the blood work and like deciding, okay, you know what, this makes more practical sense to me. You know, so that was kind of like with the stem cells and absolutely at the time the hormonal control. That was something that it was like, okay, I understand how important this is to keep those in balance. So whatever you recommend.
Right, to try to get them in line so your functionality improves.
Right. And so that process began in 2011 and like hasn't really stopped since. So, you know, doubling up on the human growth hormone post-stem cell treatment. You know, stem cell treatment, you get 6 months of growth. You're probably going to get 80% of your growth in the first 3 months and the remaining 20 in the next 3.
Did you have mostly stem cells from your own body, or were they like
All.
placental?
So back in
Yeah.
2014, we got them from the bone marrow in my hip, and that was Dr. Jerry, same pain management doc, and it was the first, I think he said the first local shoulder, he thought in Texas, but definitely in Dallas. And if I did well with mine, he was going to do his own, because he had a place that he flew to, and he was a pilot license, and his shoulder was killing him sitting in his cockpit. So he was gonna do his if I successfully did mine.
Or the test case?
Yes, and I think by month 3 or 4 he did his own. He didn't even wait for the full 6 months.
But you were improving. You
Right.
could see it. You could
And
see
so
a difference.
ever since that post stem cell, I've been doing a double dose of growth hormone for the 6-month growth period.
And does that help the bone on bone issue?
Yes, well that
Yeah,
helps.
that'll
So right. So that was rotary foam. Okay, and then I think the next one I did, and I'm not going to name names on the next path because I don't want to badmouth anybody, but like stem cells have come so far since then.
Right.
So my next one was 2018, and the same guy, Dr. Jerry, did the stem cells from a umbilical cord up through the spinal cord to the brain.
Wow.
And once again, I wasn't doing like my memory is, but it was rushed. It was like, hey doc, I just got diagnosed. Well, we've been trying to talk my parents. We've been trying to talk my dad into flying my mom out to do stem cells to the brain for a while.
I tried to do the same thing with my mom when she was diagnosed
so,
with MS. My brother quenched it.
And so it wasn't just on a whim.
Right.
You know, I literally got diagnosed with what I felt was the same thing as my mom.
Well, yeah.
Well, right. It was like looking at him going, wait a minute. You guys actually expect me to believe that, like, I have this other form of bullshit when my mom had an even rarer form of bullshit that's like right there with the same symptoms, and it's something different.
And you never even considered it was the uranium.
Well, the uranium has its own set of symptoms. The gadolinium attacks the connective tissue in the joints. Okay, the cobalt appears to have been the big one for nerve damage and things like that, and the vision for sure. You know, I had vision loss, so I got a rare size blood clot. Like, that's a whole story in itself. Where this happened in 2000 and, well, it's right on there, 2007, the birth of my first child. And my wife being from Sweden, I got my very first tattoo of many. And I had my baby's head wrapped in a Swedish flag blanket, you know, which was 16 hours in a tattoo chair spread out over 4 sessions as this guy's building me a nice Swedish flag on my right arm. Well, it just so happens that cobalt is in blue tattoo ink. Okay?
So that...
And well, right, so the big things with cobalt: blood clots, vision problems, you know, nerve problems. And so as I'm getting this pumped into my arm as a seemingly healthy 34-year-old, I keep forgetting if it was 30, anyway, early 30s, and I started to lose vision in my right eye. And so
simultaneously? Started right away?
Well, yeah, we couldn't figure it out. We didn't know. Well, I'm like, I'm giving baseball lessons, and it's like, why are there holes in the net? Like, I can't see the net. I know we're on podcast, so you can't see me, but it was like I had lotion in my eye.
Wow.
And so then you go see a regular eye doc. Hey, and they're like, oh, go see a neuro-optho. So you go see a neuro-optho, and now you're the only one younger than 75 in the room. You know, and they pull you back and they put you in a chair and they put your eye up there, and this was pretty funny. But there was like a nurse behind me and a doc behind me, and it was on, you know, the back and forth of like, is that what I think it is? No way, he's too young. How old are you? 34. Called in someone else. Hey, what do you think that is? It's a CRVO. Okay, so what? Well, he's 34. And it's like, oh shit. Like, that doesn't happen to 34-year-olds. It's to produce a clot that small that's going to fit in a vein that size that would cause a central retinal vein occlusion was only produced by 65 and older men who've been battling hypertension their whole lives. And here I am at 33, 34 with orthopedic issues, insomnia, anxiety, but no, you know, none of that other stuff.
And all this metal creating havoc in your body, you not having a clue. Right. It had to be.
So the kicker with the gadolinium, it was like, okay, well, we know the gadolinium attacks the joints. We're the only country left in the world that uses it. Everybody else has banned it. Long time ago.
And they're still using it now?
Yes, they're still using it.
In MRIs?
Yes, they just gave you a nice little black and orange radioactive sticker next to the waiver signature. That happened during my knowledge of gadolinium toxicity to me. I saw how yes, right. So I had like 18 known exposures, 6 of which were on one of those trips out to California.
So where they were trying to help everybody with doing these MRIs, they were actually poisoning them.
So I got out there, and this is what led to the 6 MRIs though, is that my attorneys were like, well, yeah, we got to get you checked out head to toe and find out all this damage. And you're like, look at me, I look great. I was like, are you joking? I can hit a golf ball 350 yards. I'm doing yoga. I'm throwing baseballs still. Like, sure, things are tighter and this and that, but it's like, of course you're trying to get you more money. Oh, sure, I have carpal tunnel. Of course I do. That's a riot. Okay? But they did like 53 x-rays, which was part of intake. They had a system.
53
They would
x-rays?
knock it, they were timing themselves. So many athletes were going out there, they'd knock them out in like, I forget, it was like 6 minutes flat. It was a system. It was three-man system of point,
Wow.
point, click, point, point, click. And then based on those x-rays, they would then order MRIs for the joints that looked,
Wow.
and that's where they ordered 6 MRIs. And I'm like,
6
guys,
joints?
I'm squatting 315 on my third warm-up set for 10. Like, and then I decide what I feel like that day. Like, are you joking? And they're like, your bones are horrible. You're bone on bone in every joint. You've got tendinosis. You've got carpal tunnel. You've got all this shit. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know, you're just, good job. You guys are good at lawyering, you know. But then when you fly back out, like 9, something like that, I think it was same year, you fly back out for their team, and they're trying to convince you how healthy you are.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, this isn't from baseball.
Oh, really?
Oh, so what do you do for work now? I give baseball lessons. Are you throwing in your baseball lessons? Yes, but not 97. That type of stuff.
For 8-year-olds.
But they didn't really argue much. They're like, yeah, he's fucked up.
They saw the X-rays.
Pardon my language, but they were like, yeah, we're not going to fight you much on this.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was that.
And that was prior to.
09.
That was prior to.
That
all
was
your
that
treatments.
09, 010 range right in there.
So you're having symptoms, but it wasn't really you
Right.
hadn't gotten to the point where we were just talking about. So at what point did you?
Well, but the symptoms from one of those trips,
Uh-huh.
the acute symptoms that happened. I remember getting home, and
from all the X-rays.
right from all the MRIs, all the gadolinium and exposures,
Oh.
and so they were all suspected tears, all suspected tears, every joint. So it was
Suspected
both
what?
knees.
What is the word?
It was
Suspected
both. Hold on.
tears?
It was both knees.
Uh-huh.
No, it was left knee, both hips, lumbar, and both shoulders. And that's what they thought were areas of concern at that time in my life, which was, yeah, like that 09 to 011 time. And so when I came back, I went to write a check, and I couldn't hold the pen. Like, I'd already gone through my morning routine. It wasn't because I was anxious. Like, I wasn't stressed about anything. And I went to write a check, and I couldn't hold the pen in my right hand. And I remember telling my wife, like, hey, honey, my fingers don't work. You know, and then it was, you're knocking over your coffee mug, you're misjudging doorways and bumping your shoulder. Whenever you go up and down slopes, you're tipping.
Wow.
Like, you're losing your balance. And hell no. Like, I voluntarily walked away from driving for like 3 months. It was like my wife didn't have to ask me to. I was like, I don't feel safe.
Right.
Like, I'm almost tipping over as I'm getting in the car and falling into the passenger seat just by leaning over.
That had to be so stressful mentally and not know what's causing it. You have to be. I can't imagine. Yeah.
You search everywhere.
search and
You know,
you
you
found
go to
answers.
neurologists, you go to nutritionists, you go to chiropractors, you go to naturopaths, you go to everybody. You go to essential oil people. You go to, the sound vibration therapy.
And all that helps, but I think.
Well, I'm just saying, you go down every road
Right.
trying to figure out, and it was like, I think, honestly, that one, I think they blamed on a gluten intolerance and dehydration. I think that's what we settled on for that one. And so then like 3
That's
months,
pretty radical.
so then like 3 months later, you can sleep again, and you're good enough to go function. But then like you go golf, and you go to swing a club, and you fall over.
And you don't know what's going to happen.
You fall over.
Wow.
Well, no, I mean, come on.
But-
I wasn't a great golfer, but like,
You don't fall over.
well, right. I'd shoot high 70s to mid 80s before stuff started getting bad, and then like you'd go to swing your club, and because your head was leaned out over your feet, and you got to make a backswing, and your head just collapses. Well, right, you just tip. That's what happened to my mother. It was like, okay, why is Mary back in the ER? Well, she tried to pick up the paper. She tipped over.
Just
Why?
tip.
Well, right. Why is Mary back? Well, she tried to get out of the car, and as she was leaned over her knees, she tipped and hit her head in the parking lot. So that's what was happening to me. you know, and that's where it's like, okay, it doesn't matter what I choose to do, like, there is no fun, but like for work, you know, I can't promise you that I can be there when I can't promise you if I can drive myself or make it down the stairs. You know, that's kind of the point it got to. And when the neurologists took me down that path, I mean, that's where nothing's been more studied with my past than my neurology.
Okay.
The brain's been scanned from early on as a child. I had so many brain injuries. I had 3 concussions by the time, first one in elementary, another
3
one.
concussions in elementary
No,
school?
one. I ran into a basketball pole head speed or
Oh,
full speed. So, you know, this is 1979 or 80 or 81 around there. And I know that happened for a fact. And no, I don't think I was ever taken to the hospital and diagnosed with a concussion, but I know that happened. I'm going to go ahead and count that as one. The second one happened on that junior high incident. Another one happened in 9th grade where I lost half the day, the second half of the school day, and stayed home from a varsity football game that night. And they thought it was spinal meningitis, but it turned out to be a severe concussion that I don't even remember getting.
wow.
Yeah.
Didn't even know you got it.
Didn't even know I got it. So that was 3 by the time I was 14.
Wow.
And then it, you know, it's been another, I mean, it's over 10. It's, yeah.
So Brandon, when?
Well, they thought, that's the thing though, is they thought that was it for the longest
Oh,
time.
really?
Yeah.
The concussions were causing. Oh, okay. So that kind of.
Well, right,
was their answer.
well, it'll give you a feel, like when they looked at the deterioration and dysfunction, the first thing they thought of was like, okay, like severe head trauma, you know, you've got dysfunctional portion of the brain, it's essentially brain damage. You know, that's what the cause is, we don't know. But the result is a dopamine imbalance that's so massive it puts you in a very rare range, you know, for the Parkinson's, you know, as the tool they use for the Parkinson's diagnosis, which is the DAT scan, and that's just a dopamine imbalance. And I think the bell curve for normal is plus or minus 2 within 0. Like, and so I think one side, and I don't recall which, one side was like 1.9 something, so within range but rare. And then the other side was minus 4.2. So that massive imbalance is what labeled me with Parkinson's in the first place in 2018.
Well, that's really interesting.
Well, right, so we know, well, no,
So
we don't, I'll tell you what, we don't know anything.
That's exactly
I
right.
firmly believe
That's better.
that as the metal toxicity grew greater, the Parkinson's symptoms, well, all the symptoms,
Increased.
but right, the things that you labeled with what they labeled increased. There's no doubt. Now that I've gone through rounds of chelation and know what it's like to have added metals going through your system because you take binders through an IV bag
Right.
23 times.
So now it's excreting
Well,
your
even more
cells.
than that. So, I mean, almost 30 times because you do one for each test, too. So,
Wow.
probably 30 bags of binding chemicals called EDTA
Right.
to bind with the cobalt to get it out. And when you feel the cobalt going through your system and you see what happens to your body,
What happens? I
It's
had
that-
EDTA for mercury toxicity.
you get it. My wife likes to call it Parkinson-y, where I get I get all
Okay.
T-Rex arm over here and I can't
Really?
move.
So you're
And
excreting. That's
my
your excretion.
my hands curl and my fingers do weird shit.
For a few days.
No, it's severe, like it locks up. No, it is rapid onset. We have been toying with every drug known to man, every supplement known to man to try to curb them, to no avail. It sucks.
So when
Right.
when you get
When the
inhalation,
metals get
that's what
out,
happens.
when the metals get out,
Ah.
the symptoms lessen. It only escalates to a 6 instead of an 8, and a 4 instead of a 6. And the symptoms get manageable to where you can get back and live life. Does it still happen? Absolutely. I'm still sensitive to toxins in the environment. I come into contact with them all the time. It's just a fact that my cells are going to hold on and store that longer than the
Wow.
vast majority of the population. That's all there is to it.
And then when you do release
So-
them,
right.
it's severe.
When I release them, it's severe.
Severe,
It is
right.
histamine blockers. It is cures. It's mast cell inhibitors. It is toying with other movement disorder drugs. That was one path that I was guided down by a doctor that I really respect the opinion of, but we didn't end up taking it. But yeah, of course they come back, but it's not.
Well,
I
it's
can't.
still metal.
I can
so
live my
it's
life.
cell.
I can live my
Right,
life. I mean,
right.
I'm blind in my right eye. I've got glaucoma in both, dry eye syndrome in both. Like I have nerve dysfunction. You know, the functional neurologist in 2020 and 2021, Dr. Doolittle down at Carpathia Collaborative, found that 60% of my cranial nerves weren't working.
Do you think that's improved, or do you think it's...
I know it's improved
Yeah,
because I can
okay.
ski now. Not only am I
Awesome.
not, well, I'm losing my balance during a response, okay, is one thing. Skiing is not something I can plan a week in advance. Like, if I feel like my balance and my equilibrium, like if I'm walking up the stairs, I'll go for 2 weeks where I can't go upstairs without falling backwards unless I firmly grab the handrail.
Is that even now?
No, it
Oh,
comes
that
back.
was- Okay, but
It
once in a
com-
while.
It
You're
comes
exposed.
back from time to time.
Okay.
It absolutely does. There's no doubt. But with the ligaments, with the conditions of my ligaments and tendons, they are literally calcified. Like they break, they snap. You know, my ACL pulled the end of my femur off. So instead of
That's incredible.
in a knee
That's
dislocation,
terrifying. That's one
in
of
a
the
knee
most terrifying
dislocation,
things you've said.
my ACL was already, and the attachment to the femur was stronger than the femur and pulled off the condyle in 2003.
The
So,
pain
and
had
that
to
was,
be, I
and that
cannot
was,
even imagine.
that was while I was still playing baseball. Right, so that's while I was still a functioning human, that's what was happening to my ligaments. Well, you know, it was that. And then it was the blood clot in the eye. It was like, hey, that's not supposed to happen. Hey, that's not supposed to happen. Like, that doesn't happen to people your age. ACLs don't do that to femurs.
So,
Your brain,
but I
your
look
brain
at you
doesn't,
now
your brain
and
doesn't work like this.
you look very fit, very athletic. You know, I would, when you tell me these things, it's kind of shocking. What about, let's talk about how, when it started turning for you, was it with microcurrent? Was that the first radical change, or was it the chelation that you felt?
No.
Things were going in the right direction
so
finally.
that's easy. I mean, like I
Yeah.
said, that before I flew out to go see Cameron and Cody Lowe out in Scottsdale, Cameron has now gone on to be the president of the Players Association. And, you know, he's had a microcurrent machine and used it personally since 2010, and then opened up a clinic in 2017. So when I reached out in 2019, it was fly out there. You know, at this point, it was chronic fatigue syndrome was what they gave me, along with, you know, a Parkinson's brain and insomnia and, you know, and the RX meds. When I flew out there, let's go over the
I
heavy.
saw a picture in
Well,
your
right, so let's-
in the
if we go-
podcast.
if we
It
go
was
over
like
that- if
a
we
whole
go-
screen of meds.
If we go over the heavy hitters all at once, so the opioids began acutely in like 2011 or 2012. After,
Opioids, not
yeah.
just opioids.
yeah,
marijuana.
well, right. So after, like I went, like I said, acupuncture. I did everything that I possibly could for years. For
Were you
pain
always
relief.
in pain?
Yes.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, like major
Well,
pain?
well,
all
no,
the
no. I
time?
mean,
A
that's.
lot of the time.
I can't even. When people ask me that about the pain, it's like I don't know what to say to that because I
Just
do.
lived with it.
I wake up with a dislocated shoulder because I've been laying on it for too long. And then I'll have to roll over on my side and grab my wrist and pop it back into place and wake my wife up. And that happens routinely. If I grab the seatbelt, reach across the body with the right arm and pull without focusing on turning my body the right way, it'll pop out. You know, so that type of pain, I mean, my hip, I dislocated my hip stretching on a leg press machine at the hot springs last August. I broke my hip implant stretching with a 45 plate on each side, and trust me, I don't lift legs anymore. I haven't in a long time.
Wow.
I use this what I do is I put one foot up and I just bounce it up and down to get some blood flow to the glute because I can't do any weight bearing exercises.
Wow.
L2 through L1, disc degeneration. It's a straight lumbar. I've got no cartilage in my knees, so I have to find adaptive ways to work out. So at the end of my warm up, I just tried to stretch my hamstring, and boom, as soon as I crossed over, got internal, which meant I did the 3 no-nos. No weight bearing, don't bend from the waist, and no internal rotation. And I did all 3 simply because it felt like a good hamstring stretch. And then it dislocated in the leg press.
Wow.
And then paramedics took about...
You had to call pain, couldn't move after that?
No. The leg was locked, the hip was completely out of socket. Damn. The ball broke. And so I'm sitting in the leg press machine for probably 20, 30 minutes before they could hurry up there with drugs and get like this big inflatable duffel bag and then carry me down to the ambulance. And then they took me to the hospital where they pulled it and put it back in with a broken ball. And then I show up at the orthopedic the next day, and the guys look at the thing and they see me standing there with a cane and they're like, "How are you standing?"
How were you standing?
I don't. It's
you had to.
The pain. I don't.
Just dealt with it.
Look, it's happened so many times. It's hard to put a scale.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
But anyway, with the pain. So the opioids started then, but then it was at that time I had been on 8 years of opioids, 2.5 years, 2 years of max dose benzos, scheduled, not acute, and also revolving pairs of SSRIs for another 2+ years. And that was on top of 3 blood pressure meds, complete hormone replacement, thyroid medication, Adderall, sleeping pills, muscle relaxers, gabapentin. And then, of course, a slew of eye drops and 14 injections per week and 2 nebulizers.
14 injections of what?
Hormone.
Okay.
That was the hormone
Wow.
So
how many pills? Like 75 pills a day or something?
Well, right. So at one point through this whole cycle, we were on 75 medication supplements a day. And that was like as many topicals and injections and powders that we could, and liquids that we could, because the capsules were like, almost 100 per day.
That's a lot of the capsule itself too in your body, so it's a whole other thing.
Multiple sleep studies, the brain never shut off, never came close to sleep. No.
Never ran.
So anyway, going through the microcurrent introduction to my life
where did the light at the end of the tunnel
was
start?
After they found we did infrared imaging, first thing we did in Scottsdale, and they found failing organs, dying tissue around the right hip implant, and a dysfunctional back, and chronic, clots and inflammation in the face and brain, and just a mess. And then we did 7 microcurrent treatments in 5 days. They wanted to do 10, but I thought it was a miraculous feat to make 7 out of the 10 that I did. Because the time was spent back in the rental with throwing up, not being able to get out of bed, just laying in the bathtub for just not feeling like you can leave.
You were detoxing with that microcurrent too, wasn't that helping them?
This is the hard part, because we know it detoxes. I was like that before I got there.
Okay.
Well, I pushed the trip back twice. I just had my 3rd sinus surgery in 2 years.
Wow.
And another mold infection in my sinuses. That's why I couldn't get cleared to fly out there. So I was actively fighting off a mold infection. And of course,
the same time.
Of course the microcurrent was going to cause detox, but I still was well enough to make 7 out of 10, which was, and then we went with like a month break of getting to know the Health Resource Center in Flower Mound, getting on the books, getting an intake, getting a microcurrent scheduled, took like about a month. And so then we resumed treatments, and we were supposed to do 3 like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, every week. And I probably, in all reality, did too. Whether it was me canceling or them canceling or me forgetting what time my appointment was, probably 2 per week. And then by the end of January, and all was in an effort to get the body strong enough to get the poisonous hip implant up that we just found.
Got it.
Right, that's all we knew, is we suspected it was hip and hip only, and we got to get you strong enough to do surgery to do the hip, And then because of my neurotic ass, I when they told me that it was the hip implant, like pretty good chance.
Right.
But they didn't do that testing there. Like there was a heavy metal specialist a town over, 15 minutes down the road. Of course, I hopped in my car and hit 120 on the 121.
And you went right there.
And I drove there at 4 p.m. on a Friday, and I'm banging on the door, and the ladies are like, "Can we help you?" I'm like, "I've got a poisonous hip in me. I need to get it out."
You have to help me right away.
So like, "You need to make an appointment, sir." And so I got back and saw Dr. Rector, and when we did the metals test, it came back with every single metal you could think of.
And this was your first metal test?
Except for cobalt. And I'm like, "Dude, where's the cobalt? Where's the cobalt?" And he's like, "But wait, what's gadolinium? And holy shit, why are my numbers 160 times past the range? What the?" Well, right, and that's where watching the doctor's reaction was like, "Dude, I don't care what you just said. That was a holy shit right in the middle of your walk when you saw that. Like, I know that's fucked up."
You know the body
like this,
language.
Well, right. So that's what led us to genetics, back to genetics. And this scope grew far beyond cobalt in a faulty hip implant. The hip implant just alerted us to the presence of metals. And then when we opened Pandora's box, it was like...
And
it
they
was
must
like,
be amazed that you were alive and living through
that's,
that.
yeah,
That's the crazy part.
When you'd meet a new doc, so every time you find something, and the doctor's like, "Holy shit, that's interesting, but I don't do that." There's a specialist. And her name's Margaret Christensen, Dr. Christensen down at Carpathia Collaborative. She's a mold specialist. Dr. Rector's a metal specialist. Like we don't do that.
You gotta go everywhere.
Well, we do this, but we don't do metals. Metals is Rector, molds is Christensen. And so you have a specialist for everything.
And you did it all.
Right. So when we started to remove the metals, we finally got to the point where the microcurrent had helped enough to where I could get cleared for surgery. And one of the nights we were celebrating, I was out at the dinner table with my family, and it's like, I was able to sit there for 15 minutes and eat a meal. That was huge.
That was huge.
Right.
That's amazing.
And it's like, "Hey guys,
Stuff's working.
I've got the surgery coming, we're getting all ready."
Yeah.
And I stand up from the dinner table, and boom, my left kneecap dislocates.
No.
I dislocate my left kneecap, and my knee is now locked at a 45-degree angle, and in a panic, I grab my ankle and I start trying to yank my leg straight.
Oh my God.
And with each one, I'm screaming louder. And my wife is like, "Boys, go to your room. Honey, please stop. Please stop." Just like, don't do that anymore.
You just couldn't help it.
I
You were
couldn't
trying
help
to
it.
get it,
I couldn't help it. And so we go in, and that's where they found. He's like, "Dude, I don't know what to say to this." He's like, your kneecap looks like a soft-shell crab. It's got burrs and claws, and it's like sandpaper." And he goes, "And one of those claws, when you're seated, just looped around a tendon, and when you stood up, it just yanked it right out of place." And he's like, "I can't do anything with this knee." He goes, "There's no cartilage left." He's like, you're dealing with multi-compartmental, bone on bone. You've got a partially torn patellar tendon, a kneecap that looks like this. Like, they're not going to approve anything but a replacement." And so I said, "Well, we're planning on doing stem cells, so, if we were to do a cleanup, just go in there and clean up the mess, just scope it up and smooth it out."
Positive attitude.
And so that's the route.
That's fabulous.
So that's the route we went. But then at my 3-week, so we did that, and then doing microcurrent. Like, how am I gonna do a right hip replacement on a recovering left knee?
Right.
Like, so the knee had to get cleared not just to
Oh
walk,
my God.
but to rehab a right hip replacement.
So not even, right.
Right.
So you couldn't even do a knee replacement because you had to get the hip
Right.
first.
Right. Well, and I'm not
You
gonna.
wanna do
I'm
a
not
knee
gonna do
replacement.
a
Good,
replacement.
okay.
So anyway,
Right.
so this was like February 15th, I think, and this was March 11th,
right before COVID.
right before COVID.
The drama.
Yes, and so that was the orthopedic path, and then right after the hip surgery, I come in for my knee follow up, and I had a floater that looked like a pretty decent sized marble floating around in my leg, up above my knee, on the like IT band, right around the IT band. And so I come in and I joke with the doc, and I'm like, "Hey doc, did you drop your class ring in there?"
Oh.
Okay. And so with all these other surgeries lined up and procedures, I was trying to avoid
That you could
another trip under anesthesia.
Right.
Like, come on, I just was knocked out for 2 surgeries in 2 months. And so I was like, hey, what do you say we just get a scalpel and cut that thing out right here? And he took me on.
He did.
And yes, he did. We gave it some local, and he put an incision, and he tried to pull that rock out, and he couldn't.
He could not?
I assisted.
You assisted?
He actually, no, he had me laying down. He couldn't get it. He asked me if I could help. They put some gloves on me, and I sat up and I tried to milk it down to the incision so he could grab it. And,
oh my God! Now I've heard everything.
and we couldn't get it. So then we had to schedule a third surgery in August, or another surgery in August, and that was when they cut me with the zipper, which required 18 staples, I think, to shut, and they pulled out 6 rocks. There were calcified chunks of cartilage that had broken apart from my knee,
Wow.
and that were like 1 inch by 1.25 inches
That
big.
big.
Yeah. And it was the metals that ground up the cartilage that literally broke it into like chunks. My cartilage fell
I have
apart.
chills.
Yes. Well,
That's unbelievable.
that's what gadolinium does to connective tissue.
And they're still using it.
Yes.
Shameful.
Yes.
Now, on your journey to health, which is obviously working, and you're actually helping other people with microcurrent now, which is phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit about that if you want. I mean, I could talk. Your story, I mean, it requires a mini-series.
Well, I want to finish with the progression of microcurrent so people understand kind of the timeline. Is
That's
that
fine. That's wonderful.
I didn't start feeling better right away.
Okay.
I didn't, not even close. I knew that things were changing. Okay, I had already been down and been tested and was monitoring so many things.
So many things.
My blood pressure 4 times a day.
Really?
I've got a smart bed. It's basically a hospital bed that measures my beats per minute, breaths per minute, heart rate variability, restful sleep, restless sleep, bed exits, and I've got data for 6 years on that. Not just recently. Like when you start spending all day, every day in bed, you have to basically make your bed a hospital bed if you want to take care of yourself. So that's what I have. And to watch all this stuff change.
Oh, you can see changes.
Oh God, yes.
With the microcurrent.
Oh yes.
Really?
Oh, it was not even.
That must have been thrilling.
So my
After
first.
everything you've been through.
So think of it from a timing perspective. When I was first introduced to it in November, month break until December, and then pretty consistent weekly with multiple treatments per week, starting in January. And then by January 30th, one of my many Facebook overshares was like, hey guys, like,
Overshares.
well, when you realize you're dying and like you start throwing your shit out there, people who've been through similar stuff DM you and help you.
Okay, interesting.
And they're afraid to talk about the fact that they were toxic with metals and molds for fear of people. I'm serious. It's like it's so anyway.
How many of us are really not though?
I get out there on Facebook and I say, okay, people, like I just slept 17 hours straight with no drugs.
Really?
And I feel like I went to Saturn and back.
Nice.
Like I haven't had more than 2 or 3 hours sleep since November. Like my blood pressure's dropped from 180 over 130 to 120 over 80. And
Wow.
and I'm like, this is changing things. Adrenaline is coming back online. I just had my first adrenaline rush
Really?
oh God. It happened in the driveway. One of my goals at first, like, Brandon, what do you want to be able to do? What would bring you joy in life? Sleeping through the night and waking up with enough clarity and energy to make my boys breakfast and safely drive them to school. That's what I would like to accomplish. And it was like 3 weeks after starting Microcurrent, I'm driving back from school
Nice.
with my 1-year-old in the back seat, in the car seat. Just, have a leisurely drive to school and drop the kids off and come home. Simple as that. And the song's playing, you pull into the driveway, and it's like, boom, you get goosebumps, your hair stands up on your arm, and you're like, holy shit, what just happened? And you stop the car because it's like you hadn't experienced adrenaline in so fucking long that you forgot what it was like.
It's amazing.
And you just start bawling. You're like, I can't, wow. Like, that's my moment. And that's where the microcurrent, those types of changes were happening to me on a regular basis.
That's phenomenal.
As I noticed sometimes horrific things coming from my gut. And urine that smelled like burning pennies, doused
It's
in
the metal.
doused in
Right,
propane
the
and
metal
lit on
coming
fire.
out.
And rashes that would have like white powder shit coming out of your skin. Well, this is what happens. Like, your skin gets so raw, you can't run a razor anywhere near your skin.
You had to have
I
a lot
do.
of metal stored in your body, and you couldn't
The-
excrete it. I mean, if
Right.
they had a way to measure the amount in
Right.
your cells,
Yeah, and
I'm
so
sure what you had, other people may have had similar kind of things, and they didn't survive.
of course
and it
not.
just
No,
went
no,
down.
no, no. Listen, I mean, I didn't crash, but I didn't have to be revived with paddles. But during one of my blood treatments, the late Dr. Stevens, whom I wouldn't be without today, and we do need to do an entire segment on him because his role in this was, there is no today without Dr. Stevens. And Dr. Stevens, we were in the middle of my, I don't know, it had to be well over 20 blood treatments, ultraviolet blood irradiation, where they pull 7% of your bloodstream out, they run it through ultraviolet lights, then they put it up in a bag full of saline and run oxygen into it for 10 minutes or however long they do it, and then they run it back through the lights, send it back into your body as now bleached, clean, parasite, bacteria-free blood that's going to go back into your bloodstream and have an oxidative effect. That was before COVID started. Like, I was already bleaching my insides from the insides
Wow.
out as COVID started. So like, when COVID came, it's like, oh shit, people, like, what do I do? And they're like, nothing. Like, we already have you on that plan. Like, you're
Right?
doing 2 nebulizers a day, you're doing microcurrent, you're doing ozone at home through the ears. We're literally disinfecting you from the inside out. Even if you came into contact with someone with COVID, out and about, we're killing it on site, like twice a day.
Amazing.
With
So
this.
you never got COVID?
No, never. No, my wife got it twice. I slept face to face with her. I taunted it. I was like, boys, watch this. Like, oh yeah. I'd chase my wife around the house and get right in her face and drink her coffee and share a lip balm. And
Good sense of humor
I
throughout this.
never got it. And and as
You're
far as
pushing out any germ.
well, listen, my perspective going into COVID was a hell of a lot different than. Look,
Well, you've been
I started seeing targeted immunologists and immunologists that were doing targeted therapy for me in 2017, and then boom, another try with the doctor in 2019. Like, I planned my meat purchases at Tom Thumb around vaccine time for flu, so I get 10% off my grocery list. Okay, if I forgot, the only reason I wouldn't get the flu vaccine is if I forgot. I was not a pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine anything. I was like, well, of course I'm going to get the flu vaccine. It's flu season. Like, I haven't researched this. I don't. You got crazy people over here saying vaccines kill people, and you got all these doctors saying vaccines. I don't, whatever. It's vaccines. I have no knowledge. Until I started getting sick, and it's like, okay, I'm addicted to Afrin. I've got to take Benadryl multiple times per week. I'm constantly congested. I can't breathe through my nose when I sleep at night. Something needs to be done. So I started seeing targeted immunology, way back when. So by the time COVID came, like not
Your immune system.
right. I mean, I was seeing an oncologist, for my immune system because I was down where chemo patients were, but I couldn't get plasma transfusions approved because I didn't have cancer.
Wow.
They're like, well, we can't give it to some. Well, his numbers are down here.
Right.
He
just doesn't have the cancer.
Right. So we can't do
Probably being
plasma.
killed by the metal.
Right, and so that's when they started to try to send me to my third immunologist. And then finally my cardiologist, and I don't know if he wants to go on record, so I'll keep him out of this, but I begged and pleaded with their office. I was like, please do something. They're going to make me go through immunotherapy again. And the last 2 times it just wrecked me. And I was like, insurance is directing my care. And
Wow,
the
insurance directing.
and the cardiologist was like, who do I need to write a letter to?
Because they listen to
Because
cardiologists.
Well, because he knew. So one of the very first symptom on Cobalt is enlarged floppy heart, but cardiomyopathy. I have it. Right. So that's why I was seeing a cardiologist. He was the one managing Bystolic and Lodipine and Losartan, and looking at my enlarged heart with this story about Cobalt, which he knew nothing about, but was fascinated. And so he stepped in and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm new to the party, but guess what? I'm in charge of the heart and I win. So if I say that this is going to disrupt, I couldn't get off my beta blockers to do immunotherapy. I couldn't get off the Bystolic. We tried. It spiked the heart. It spiked the blood.
Really? Right
laying
away.
in bed, I would be laying there at 125 over 96. And then not anything going on, no stress, no nothing. And 5 minutes later, it's 175 over 138. And now,
Really?
Right. And so that's why I was tracking the blood pressure. And so
Yeah.
he stepped in because he saw that. We went through measuring the blood pressure 4 times daily. We took the log. We looked at it. We looked at the difference between the top number and the bottom. I don't know all that shit. But based on what they were finding, they're like, hey, you guys can't do this to him. Like, he can't get off his beta blocker. So that's where we were during COVID at that point, was the cardiologist stepped in and said, you can't do plasma transfusions for your IgG deficiency. You can't do immunotherapy.
That's what insurance wanted you to do.
Take care, literally, I couldn't take antibiotics for any of I've had 14 surgeries since November of 2019.
And you couldn't take any.
Could not take
all,
antibiotics
which is
at
a
all.
huge big deal for
At
surgery.
all.
Because the infections
Right,
you can
had to
get.
sign waivers. That's why we passed on the dental surgery. Way too prone to infection, couldn't take antibiotics. But yeah, I had 4 metal fillings, 2 of which have since fallen out. Rotten jaw, both with metal fillings. One
You
was
have any metal now?
Yes, I have 2 left.
2 left?
Still, it's a process.
It's a process.
I'm putting it off and building a
You'll do
business and doing this, but yeah, the microcurrent didn't really start kicking in for a while. But the things that
We
were
had to
changing,
go through a lot of impedance.
the things that were changing were inexplicable.
Interesting.
Right, because
In a positive fashion.
well, because of the litigation for the hip implant, we were documenting everything. We were taking ultrasound imaging of
Interesting.
organs. Like, they watched my liver shrink by 3 centimeters in a 11-month period.
Wow.
And as not being a doctor, I have 4 children whom I love, and was there for the birth of all 4 of them, and was looking at ultrasounds, and I've looked at my own ultrasounds and MRIs, and when you showed me my first ultrasound of a liver, it looked like my infant. I don't know what I'm looking at. But it's white and it's gray and it's black and looks like a kidney bean. I don't know, And then when you get your second one, and your second one looks like a kidney bean, with no white and no gray on it, and they're like, well, Jesus, Brandon, you're like, all your fatty
So
tissue
you have
in
fatty
your liver.
liver.
Well, right. I was taking. I was 3 bottles a Dayquil a week. I was all those meds, oxycodone, SSRIs, and benzos, all at once.
Wow.
That was the protocol for chronic fatigue and had been, where just it turned into a year in bed of like, well, if you can't sleep, take pills. Here, try these, those don't work. Take these, those don't work. Okay, switch these and these, and let's try these together. And mind you, I had doctors from 4 fields collaborated. Well, hey, I think we should put him on this. Well, if we put him on this, we've got to take him off one of these. Like, there was no intermingling. Like, there was no,
We
like,
had
hey,
doctors working
yes,
together. Thank
absolutely.
goodness. That had to be
I had
collaborative.
quarterback, but it was
You had a
all,
team.
but it was all RX.
Right.
It was Trintellix and Bupro. The SSRI combo we landed on was Trintellix and bupropion. And, you know, that was after trying several different levels of other SSRIs. The benzos, we went right to clonazepam. First it was acute, then it was 1 in the afternoon, because that's always when they happened, and then it was morning and afternoon, 2 milligrams a day. 2 milligrams each time. Right.
That's
And that was, right.
a huge amount of drugs and all the
And
other
then,
things.
right, and then that was thrown on top of the opioids, which had been acute, post-surgery, you know, 2 hydrocodone a day, 4 hydrocodone a day, and then 4 hydrocodone and 2 20 milligram oxycodone per day. So that's, like, at that time, you know, we can blame the drinking in my 20s all day long on this, but through my 30s, the liver was fine and functioning, you know, and
But
now,
still with all those
and now with the
medications.
metals, the meds, the molds, right, so running through the liver, where there was no more partying. I mean, come on, that was something I tried to maintain to be somewhat normal. Like, you know, when you're adults and you get invited to a Halloween party and you drink 5 times a year, but every time you do, it hits you like a ton of bricks.
Really, it hit you really hard.
Yes, absolutely. And the detox.
So it wasn't pleasant.
Well, right, you're adding toxins to an
Right.
already toxic system that's spending all of its time and energy on other things. How is it possibly going to throw alcohol onto the mix?
And then just
Right.
a combination
Well,
of all
right.
those medications
But also the genes. So for every
genes,
time,
wow.
if you and I have 2 glasses of wine, and the time it takes you to burn 2 glasses, I'm burning 1.3. You know, it's not processing toxins efficiently. And, you know, when you think about how alcohol affected me like it didn't affect others, that's it. It's like, no, it hit me faster and it stayed longer, you know. And by that time, you look at the liver. Surprisingly, it was like liver, gallbladder, spleen, all screwed, and then kidneys were actually somewhat good.
Thank God.
I have been, and that's where measuring the water, having to take these metal tests where it requires you to collect your urine for 24 hours and log how much is coming out at what time, and you notice that you're having these extreme water dumps where, you know, you'll go empty bladder first thing, half bladder at 11, then you don't pee again until 4, and then between 4 and midnight you'll pee 11 times. Like and I was on a hydration schedule of over a gallon a day. So I'm tracking how much water and how much is coming out the other end. And what the body does is it starts hanging on to water to protect itself. Okay? And then it dumps, it eventually dumps when it finally feels safe. I don't need this anymore. And so going through, I mean, it was 10-pound weight shifts in a matter of days.
Wow.
As you're going, the bloat, your head would swell. You've seen the pictures, but
Yeah.
I was a baseball player for a year. I know what my hat size is. I'm 7 1/4. Okay, I mean that's been it's been my hat size since I was 21. You know? And then now you're up to over an 8.
Really?
Yeah, and then when
your head swell?
yes.
Well, your face was swollen, but I didn't know that made your hat size big.
Yeah, and so
Wow.
I went from over an 8 back down to and now I'm 7 1/8. So I'm an 1/8 inch smaller than I ever was, and it grew up to over 8.
You said you're leaner in your waist too than you were.
Right, so I went from, I had been 33, 34 inches through my 20s, 30s, up till about 40, and then ballooned up to 37 inches and 245 pounds.
We have that picture of you.
Right,
Yeah.
in 2020, into 2020. And then now I'm 185 with a 31-inch waist, and I haven't had a 31-inch waist since freshman year of high school. And yeah, I mean,
So
that
that's
was
body composition. You've lost, you're leaner.
inflammation. That it's not, sorry, it's not fat.
Okay.
You know, I went through
It's
weight.
inflammation
Well, right.
of
So
puffy tissues.
through my 30s, as I was training athletes, giving baseball lessons, working with them in the gym, coaching summer baseball, an active individual who worked out 6.5 days a week and would look for excuses not to go to the gym, like vacation, or hey, like, I got a long drive today, I'll skip a workout. You know, it was constant. I had a nutritionist, I had a trainer. I would say, I would give them a goal, and I'd say, hey, I want to bulk up and I want to put on some size and get up to 220. Put me on a diet and a workout plan that'll get me there. Boom, we'd achieve it. We're, you know, taking 12 different measurements on the body, figuring out where we're retaining water, measuring our food, all that shit. And then I'd cut, and I'd say, all right, I want to get down to, you know, let's just see how lean we can get for the summer. Let's shoot for like 185, 190. Let's go on a cutting plan so I can learn how to do it, you know, and teach others. And so then I do it. My waist never got below 34 inches. My body fat got down around 5%. It was like 4.7, I think.
Wow, that's really low.
And just to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And I felt like shit. Body was horrible. But this was like in that 2008 to 2013 range. That was like 5 years of that, of just tracking diets, getting checked, retaining water, measuring food, counting calories. So that's what I did through my 30s, just to honestly educate. You know,
Right.
I realized that I was asking all these young athletes to put on weight when that was never, by the time I cared, it was never something I had to try to do. Like my natural body was 195 to 205, and I never really had to try to
You
eat
don't have
to
to
put
worry
on
about
weight.
it. That's pretty
Right.
ideal.
And so now that I'm asking these boys, these high school boys, to load up on calories and do stuff that I've never done, well, no, let's do it. Like I want to know what it takes to bulk up, so that way I can go, no, hey, mornings suck. No, prep your food before. Making that oatmeal in the morning is a pain in the butt. You put it in the fridge and you got 700 calories of that in your protein bar and your peanut butter right there in a cup. I had to do that for athletes, so I wanted to do it
Right.
myself to learn how.
And to
You
see
know,
the results.
There you go. That's it. That was my fascination, was that. And so by the time it got to an anti-mold protocol, and I've got a lady in Dr. Christensen who's been doing this for a long time, and looks across the table at a 240-pound, toxic 40.
You got up to 240?
245 was my
Wow.
most. And so then it was, she's looking across me at the table and she's like, I've never seen anybody test positive for all 5 mycotoxins out of range before. Like, this is a
I've
first
never
for me.
heard of it either.
This is a first for me. And she goes, in order to do this, this would be like a 2 to 3 year, 4 year long process. If you can go no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no soy, no nightshades, no legumes,
Whoa.
no oils except for coconut and avocado, no mushrooms, a whole list of shit.
Anything
And
that
I
can
just,
aggravate a
and
mold
I'm like,
condition.
well, the metals doctor told me that we can't keep getting the metals out until you take the mold out of my brain, sinus, lungs, and gut. Because when we're pulling it out of the tissue and it's trying to detox through the gut, it's making me so toxic I'm landing in the hospital.
'Cause of the
So
mold.
I don't really have a choice. So as far as your diet goes, it's like, lady, you have no idea who's sitting across from you. Like, I've been on the weirdest diets you've ever heard of. I have forced myself to consume 800 grams of carbs on purpose while
Why?
bulking.
Oh,
Well, that's my discipline when it comes to following a regimen.
okay.
Forget it. I'm dividing up 100 different capsules between 5 shot
Right.
glasses.
So
and
taking those foods out's not a big deal for you.
Absolutely not.
That's
Of course,
great.
of course, it's going to suck.
Right.
But I know how to do this,
Right.
and so
You
I
have the
did.
discipline.
And so I did. And the check-ins every couple months, and the rescans and the retests, And then at like 11 months, it's gone, and she's like,
All the mold was gone?
I don't get it.
Did she say anything else besides eliminating those foods?
Well, right, so I had my ozone machine at home.
Or your ozone machine?
Right, so I was
Okay.
doing ozone through stethoscope attachment and then drinking the water to help kill the gut. I
Uh-huh.
was taking the biocidin, so biocidin is an antifungal. So
Okay.
I bought the Navage nasal rinse, and I would do 2 rinses of colloidal silver and biocidin, an antifungal. And that was, I had already had 3 sinus surgeries repairing all the, so it was a roto-rooter of just getting the antifungal in and around the face. And, I was doing infrared, microcurrent,
So
compression boots.
you were doing that whole,
Right, I was doing that on my own.
okay, wow.
Right, and so when at 11 months,
So altogether, it was
I had to
really,
get cleared by Dr. Christensen before we could resume with Dr. Rector. And so when Dr. Rector, he knew I was moving to Colorado prior to me going to Dr. Christensen and hadn't planned on seeing me again. He's like, hey, you got to get this. I'm not going to kill you. I'm on board with this, but we're going to kill you. Like, this is not good. Like, I can't do this. I can't do any. I can't do any more IV chelation with you responding to it like this.
Right.
I won't do it.
Because he was right.
Right. And so when I showed back up at his office, I'm like,
Well, here I
let's
am.
roll. And he's like, no way. And I'm like, call her. And he's just like, it was
That was 11 months?
it was at that time, and that was summer of 21. So by spring and summer of 21 is when doctors like that said, you need to write a book. You've just done something that I can't explain.
Nice.
And then it was,
Sure.
and then it was mold doctor, metal doctor, therapist, neurologist, primary care. They're like, they just start shaking their head at you, and they're like, do you understand, like, what you've done, like the changes that have occurred? And I'm like, hey guys, all of you, if you treated every single one of these surgeries and procedures seriously, you would have ate a bullet a long time ago.
Exactly.
Well, like, I walk out for a hip replacement, like I'm going on I'm going out for a 4-hour round of golf. Like, hey guys, I'll be back. I'm just
Getting a
rolling
hip
out.
replacement.
Hey, it's only an overnighter, no big deal. Hey guys, the cardiologist just told me I shrunk my heart. All the inflammation's gone, and I'm off all 3 blood pressure meds.
So you must have just had this feeling of joy when you hear these.
But no,
finally.
you don't. You can't comprehend. Hey, I'm looking at images of my liver side by side, and I see that. But there's no joy. There's just like disbelief.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. At first,
Like,
yes. Not that I thought they were lying to me by like putting another image. I saw it moving around. Like it was a live image. Like my kids when we look at them. And it's like, okay.
side room.
Well, it's like you pull up the old one and you're scanning the new one, and I'm like, I see the difference. No, I get it. And I'm like, you guys are talking about this very nonchalantly. Like this happens all the time. And the people involved in microcurrent were never shocked. Ever. By all that was happening, where every other specialist who didn't use microcurrent was like, I can't explain what just happened. Holy shit. And so, over time, you're asked to come, go talk to someone, tell them about it, and you don't even have the confidence to, severe PTSD, severe social anxiety. I moved here to Steamboat, and this is a great one, and I don't even know his name because he never reached out. But one of the first social functions I went to in October 31st of 2021, we'd lived here a month and a half, and I spent the first 6 weeks introducing myself and my case to about 8 doctors trying to find a team in town.
Mm-hmm.
But like still, I was on, when I first met Dr. Fegley, who took on my case, I was on 75 medications and supplements a day.
Wow.
And that was mid-October 2021. And I go to a Halloween party. I think it was on McCain at the time. I meet the host of the party. I, tell them, they ask about them, tell them about the hip, blah, blah, blah. And they mentioned that, someone in their neighborhood just had his taken out. He's actually out back. And I got to go meet him. I'm like, oh my God. Like, by this time, I knew a lot about the metal. It was already...
So someone else had a similar thing?
Yeah, so he had his taken out because it was, not because it failed, but
metal?
because it was recalled.
Oh, the recall.
Yeah,
right.
so I go meet him, and I tell him about lots of stuff associated with cobalt, and I'm like looking at him like, what's up? Like, you have any of these? Like, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. And he's like, no. It's like, he goes, I'm pretty lethargic. I don't exercise much anymore. I used to be a mountain biker, and I broke my femur when I was like 29, and that's what led to the hip replacement. That was the best option. And he's like, I was diagnosed with early onset dementia, but other than that, I'm good. And I'm like, other than that, okay, all right. So I get diagnosed with Parkinsonism with polyneuropathy, jumping through all the hoops that I just did. I tell you about that, and I tell you about the lawsuit, and that you weren't even aware of.
He wasn't aware of the lawsuit?
No. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, people are, I forget what I said, but I said something to the effect of, you should really look into that. Like, please keep my number if you want to talk.
And he never contacted you?
No, it's...
But with the early onset dementia,
Think about it.
Light went on.
He's never met me.
Right.
I walk up to him on a cane, looking like hell at a Halloween party, and over a cocktail, I'm the guy who tries to tell him that I had metal toxicity to the brain that caused Parkinson's-like symptoms that wasn't really Parkinson's when you remove the metals. And you sit there and tell me that you were diagnosed with dementia at 36.
Same thing.
And it doesn't even faze you. Okay. This is a strange world.
This is a strange world.
This is a strange world.
Because that to me would be a light bulb going on.
When I'm sitting on a chairlift,
right.
And I'll meet a gentleman. Hey, what are you doing in town? Oh, I bought New Wellness. We're downtown. And blah, 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 Parkinson's. And then it gets to, yeah, my wife has Parkinson's too, but it's the more traditional kind. Ah, yes, the traditional kind. I started with that one and then went non-traditional. My mom went through Stanford Med, like I said. The list of entities that landed on Parkinson's or some form thereof, or palsy, or neuropathy, or polyneuropathy.
But what you're saying, for people who are receptive to the information, it's a godsend.
Yeah.
I mean, think of all the symptoms of metal toxicity.
I walk around with my letters in my phone from UT Southwestern Genetics that I have that UQ2R, I forget that anagram, but whatever it is. I remember the rest of them, but it's the PKNPY gene, which is short for Parkinsonism with polyneuropathy, which I remember by pumpkin pie. So PKNPY. Okay, I have that. Like that is in my body.
You could easily slip into that kind of.
And for you to tell me that I have that, and my mom died from what she died from, and the exact symptoms that that's supposed to associate with have, like I said, not gone away, but I've mitigated through the removal of metals to allow me to live my life.
Exactly.
Go ahead, tell me I have Parkinson's. I'm good. Exactly. I have it. Cool.
You have the gene for it.
Wonderful.
But look how you mitigated it.
They diagnosed me with it before they knew about the gene. They diagnosed me because of a DAT scan in 2018. Now I get to say it. With traditional Parkinson's.
Traditional.
Well, I'm just saying,
it's
like
crazy.
that's so yes, that's the path that I went down with Parkinson's, where it kind of came back in the picture late when the doctors I went through 8 or 9 primary cares back in Texas. Once they weren't able to facilitate the care that I told them I needed, I moved on. I need a referral for this. Well, I can't write a referral for an orthopedic surgery on your knee unless it's a replacement. Right. Well, no. But I would go in and say, I need this for this, not, hey, here's a referral. You need to go see this specialist. And finally, I landed with Dr. Wasson, who's a DO, and he was willing to quarterback for me.
Nice.
And every time I came in during COVID, he would have his interns, whoever was following him around that day, and he'd like come in and he'd sit down and he'd be printing up like 4 referrals for surgeries and like 3 new medications into the computer. And as I'm doing that, he's like looking to these mid-20s and he's like, hey, tell him your metal story. Yep. And the gene? That's right. Hey, and Raynaud's syndrome? Yep. Tell him what happened with the cold thing? Yep. And now what are you thinking because of that? Yeah, that's what I thought too. And then tell him what Dr. McNutt said at genetics. Yep. All right, here you go. All right, thanks. And then each time in, you'd have to retell it with a new group of 2 kids. And
But it was such a good learning experience for them.
And it was every 3 weeks.
Every 3
And he was open to the toxins being the main source of all this.
See, he's all about the cause rather than treating the symptoms.
He was willing to go down that route
and
facilitate the care that I needed in Dallas. And so that's where he just sat back and he's like, you're going to do stem cells to the brain? Wow. Let me know how that goes. Like,
he must have loved hearing about
Keep me posted.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
And so 8 stem cell treatments later, it started with the bone marrow, then it was umbilical cord, then it was fat cells, then it was exosomes, which are stem cell derivatives. And they're so much smaller, you get 110 billion versus 1.5 million stem cells in the same volume.
Where do they come from? The last one you're talking about, exosomes?
Umbilical cords.
They're from umbilical.
Yes, so they're fetal cells. There's no bad traits, there's no nothing. And the company that we go through, Dynacord, uses a patented sterilization process where they sterilize it with ozone prior to distribution. And they're the only exosome that's FDA inspected. So they open their books to the FDA, who comes in and certifies purity and quantity of each batch. So that's where we've gotten from 2014 when I did my own bone marrow. So 40, what year was that? So I was 40 or 41 at the time. And where you're getting a 40-year-old cell and putting it into your shoulder. So now we've reduced the size and broken it down to exosomes. So when I did my first stem cells to the brain, they had to go up through the spinal cord with stem cells. So it was gowned up, full-on surgical table, spinal tap needle to deliver 1 cc of stem cells to the brain, and then we took another 4 cc's intravenously. And then that was my second stem cell treatment. And so then
that's pretty brave to get it
by the time I went back for my second brain treatment, once we cleared the mold from the brain, I wanted to do them to the brain again. We had to clear the mold first.
Wow.
So once we got the mold out of the brain, we went intranasally with a drip, because the exosomes literally soak through the tissue into the brain.
So you think the stem cells are what cleared the mold from your brain?
No. We weren't allowed to do stem cells until the mold was gone.
Oh, until the mold was gone.
Right. We had to wait till because if you put stem cells to the brain and there's mold, where's it going to grow? It's not a growth environment. That's a toxic petri dish.
Okay.
You have to clear it out. Remove the mold, reduce the inflammation. Main thing. Was they had to bring down the inflammation in my brain before we could do stem cells again. And by that time, we had gotten to exosomes, which are small enough to break the blood-brain barrier without cheating and going through the spinal cord.
Oh, perfect.
Right. So you can get them intravenously. You can do a nasal drip.
You see the progress.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you're living through the progress.
I've seen it go from rotary phone to iPhone 13.
Exactly, on the body.
Right. And
Your story's amazing. It really is. So I think for anyone listening, I mean, if you have any kind of symptoms that you may suspect you have metal toxicity, you can get a blood test.
Yes, you can also use microcurrent as a diagnostic tool, which was used on me.
Oh, really?
Yes, so it'll detect, I think they're up to it's always updating, but they're up to 35,000 different things that they can test that's going to set off a frequency. So if I have cobalt in my system, it will emit a frequency. So if you put your hand on a Zytoscan, it will alert you to the presence of cobalt, but won't tell you how much. So then you go do a blood serum test So 24-hour urinalysis is what they call their full panel. That's where you either take oral, but oral's not strong enough. You do an IV bag full of EDTA, which then binds with the metals, pulls it from your tissue, because gadolinium stores in the tissue. If you don't do EDTA, you're going to test negative for gadolinium. It's not going to pull it out of any of your tissue.
Okay.
So the EDTA goes in, pulls it out, do a 24-hour urinalysis afterwards, send off 2 samples, and that's that's the one that tested for the uranium, gadolinium, nickel, aluminum, lead.
Is that the best way to test for metals? Is EDTA injection and then collecting the urine?
At least that's what they did on me.
Okay.
But that's what gave us our
There's
levels.
a blood test too, but this sounds a lot more accurate.
Well, right, but a blood test isn't going to pull gadolinium out without any binder.
Oh, I see. So it could be there.
Right.
It's it.
Exactly. It's pulling the metals out so you get a true reading of how many metals, and how much are in your system. So that's what they did on me. We were alerted via microcurrent, and we backed it up with blood serum and urinalysis.
And you've had tests since then to monitor?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all going down?
Well, yeah, I mean, the mold comes when I have
The
a mold
mold's gone.
Right. I've had mold exposure from my car, I've had mold exposure from hotels. Where I could track back and go, yes, that was a mold response, but yes, the metals levels, I've removed 5 metals completely. So the uranium, I think it was the uranium's gone completely.
That's fabulous.
The aluminum's gone completely. The lead reduced by 80%. The gadolinium by 30%. The cobalt gone completely. Chromium gone completely. And then the molds, we didn't retest for molds.
Right.
All the symptoms went away.
Perfect.
Like I don't need to do an added test to know what mold is now. Now that I know what it feels like.
Well, right. You would know if you had
I know what to take. I know how to kill it. It's not a guessing game anymore. It's like, no, that's what happens to my optic nerves. They get so sensitive to light I can't drive when I have a mold infection in my face.
Interesting.
Well, being blind in the right eye, I only have one eye to rely on. All the peripheral's gone on the right. And when this one's affected at all, it's like,
it's like alert.
Right.
You're on alert.
Right. So there's periods of times
So
where
mold exposure might give you more sensitivity.
Exactly. Yeah, but
really
my metal levels, like my Parkinson symptoms, there are no more what I call. I gave them a name other than seizures.
You had seizures?
Well, it's
or
so
like spasm kind of.
it would progress. It would start with tightness along the posterior chain, like the calves and the hamstrings and the glutes would start cramping.
Oh, that was your warning system.
Then the pain would start in the back, the lumbar. Then you'd start getting the tremors, inner tremors, where you'd start shaking. And then your hands and feet, your extremities would be extremely cold. That's why they thought it was Raynaud's syndrome or Raynaud's disease for a while. And then your limbs, especially my right side, would contort and spasm. And then your chest would, if it kept going, your chest would collapse and flex and it was hard to breathe. And then you'd basically end up in a fetal position in bed in pain. You can't straighten the body, for sometimes hours, nights, through the night. If it stopped at 20 minutes, that was yes, victory.
Wow.
It was pounding liquid Benadryl, activated charcoal, mast cell inhibitors.
And you're not experiencing that anymore.
They don't get that severe.
No.
It comes back,
but it's more subtle.
But it's more subtle where it'll start to come on, and I have my tools, my Benadryl, my charcoal, everything in my car, in my backpack, at home, nightstand, bathroom, gym at the locker, or a locker at the gym. You learn, and now when I travel, I can take 2 Ziploc bags full of 8 different supplements and 2 medications and just throw it in a backpack and take a 2-day trip to Denver.
And it's an as-needed.
When before, it would be I'm taking my nebulizer, my pulse ox, my blood pressure cuff, a cooler for my refrigerated medication,
wow.
have rescue inhalers on hand, So that's the difference.
Brandon, that's the
Are they
area.
still there? Yeah, they're still there. But I can hop in my car for a 3-hour drive with little to no preparation
Nice.
and have what I need in my armrest.
And that's a huge
Oh,
journey from where
getting
you were.
your life back, getting your life.
Yeah.
It's allowing me to do the things with my family and re-engage that I couldn't do for so long. That was leading to the clinical depression. That was causing the SSRIs to be needed. You know, you can't do anything enjoyable. You can't plan a vacation and promise your family that you can join them. And then
That
it's
is
like,
so hard.
well, right. So now that you're there, like, hell no, you don't lose sight of that. Like the fact that I can just hop in the car and go with the family.
You really appreciate it.
Hell yes, you
Yeah, you really
do. Because
appreciate
that's where your goals are. I mean, forget, you know, the ends of my bones are deformed. I'm looking at 2 shoulder replacements. It's unavoidable. The heads of my humerus are so deformed that I can barely lift my hands above my ears. Okay? And it's going to happen at some point. And that's all right. Because, no.
But you stopped the decline.
Right,
I mean,
I still
you stopped
have
it before it could get
I
worse.
still have the ability to live my life and work
Right.
around 2 shoulder replacements that I'm not even, there's not a bit of anxiety that I'm looking at my next several joint replacements because of my ability to recover and the fact that I got my head back. Like the fact that
That's
my
amazing.
wife got her husband back, my kids got their dad back,
Yeah, it's huge.
and I'm able to do things that can not only bring me pleasure, but I'm also able to share this technology and what I've learned with others.
And it's an inspiration that, and to give people a lot of hope that it's important to be proactive about your health. And if you're not satisfied with the treatment you're getting, to look for other, ways to resolve it. And microcurrent heals so many
I
different.
hate to say it because it was blinding for me because I was trying to fight to save my mother's life from several states away by suggesting things for her care that weren't being followed. And I watched what happened to her body. And I watched what happened to her, like, decline and the symptoms. And I started looking at, I'd go home and visit to Cali and I'd see my mom's nightstand and I'd be like, ha! That looks like mine. I'm like, she lives in bed. I was like, it's Dayquil, it's NyQuil, it's Tylenol PM, it's Claritin, it's nasal spray, it's lotion, it's lip balm.
You said all of them.
It's dehydration, chronic infection, chronic swelling in the sinus. Everything was the same. That's what.
Part of Parkinson's is all that as well.
Well, no, those were the early on symptoms. So
Ah.
right. That was the same path with the chronic overhistamine response and the mast cell response.
It's the metal.
Was everything metals, molds. There was
And
mold.
you knew mold.
There was mold all over my mother's house.
Wow.
My father was trying to take care of her, and she was sleeping in her own filth.
Oh no.
Like, my father was not able to take care of my mother, and he was putting towels over her soiled sheets, and she was laying in it with rat poop
That had to be
scattered
so
around
hard.
her bedroom,
Oh my God.
and mold in the
You must see
bathroom
that.
and in the fridge. And you try to hire a nutritionist to come out, and she says that's too big of a task. You need somebody to clean out their house from hoarders first. And that's the situation my mother was in.
Oh my God.
Whereas I tried to sterilize myself from the inside out, did a mold test on
Right.
the house, made sure there were no EMF frequencies, no hot spots near the bed. It was like
really?
the first
You
thing.
went as far as that.
The first
Yeah.
thing with Health Resource Center was, where are you spending all your time? In bed. We need to make sure that that is mold-free, EMF-free, that you're not exposed to any toxic paint, anything inside that room if that's where you're spending
Wow.
98% of your day.
So EMF frequency, it's really interesting you're bringing that. That's
Yeah.
cell phones, that's laptops, that's television.
Right, so I was
And
introduced
we're all
to
around the screens
I
all
was
the time.
introduced to shungite. So a shungite pyramid. Shungite is a crystal, rock, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
One of my overshares on Facebook was about this, and
I
someone
have to look at your
and
overshares
someone
someday.
someone DM'd me to buy a shungite pyramid for $19 on Amazon and put it on my nightstand. So I bought an EMF reader. I tested my bedroom. I went right over my bed, right over my nightstand, and it started setting off alarm bells.
Really?
Right, it went out of range.
And what was there? Is there an alarm clock?
It was up in the air. It was up in.
The
No,
EMFs were in the air?
It was literally hovered above my nightstand and above my bed, and I can see it. I have a video of it. I walk around with the EMF reader, and the alarm starts going off, and it's like if it's supposed to be under 0.8, it was over 4.
Without a television nearby or computer? Or?
Everything was there. My nightstand. I had plugs in the wall. I had
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. I had a phone charger cord.
Okay,
I
yeah.
had a television set that was in the other
And even
room.
an alarm clock.
And so I bought a shungite pyramid, put it on my nightstand. I bought the shungite disc that you see right here, and I put it on the back of my cell phone, and I wear a shungite necklace. Because I watched the shungite take away a hotspot that was EMF right where I was
I
laying
need
in
to look
bed
into that.
for 20 plus hours a day, because they told me to make sure that where I was spending my time had to be free of toxins, including EMF.
Was the EMF reader like a Gauss meter? Because I had
It was a
an
handheld.
old-fashioned Gauss thing, and it would go.
No, it was
when you're right
it's
here.
a little handheld thing that
Yeah.
looks like a ancient Motorola cell phone
I
with
think that's
a
Gauss.
digital
I think
screen.
that I had something like that too.
And
That
you
I would
just-
walk around.
You walk
yeah.
around and it gives you readings.
Yeah.
And so I bought one, and I found it a hotspot, and I put shungite in the middle of the hotspot, and I tested it again, it was gone.
That's good to know.
And so
Because everyone can
it's
do
not
that.
me.
Everyone's in front of too many screens.
this isn't me selling a product, and this isn't me being hocus pocus or anti-5G, claiming that the towers are doing some ungodly things to the human cells. It's not that. It's me going in my bedroom, going, oh look, the alarm bells are going off. I'm going to put a rock in the middle. Oh look, alarm bells aren't going off.
And that's
I-
beautiful.
Right. I don't know what I just saved my body from, but I know that it stopped the EMF stuff.
And at the same time, I'm going to say here, we're talking about anecdotal experiences. We're not making any recommendations to any of the listeners.
Please do.
Consult your medical professionals.
Say everything you
We
need to
want
say.
no legal issues ever. This is all anecdotal, and it's very powerful, important stuff.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate this opportunity to interview you in this level of detail, because every time I see you, I hear another aspect of your story, and it's fascinating. I think you're the strongest person I ever met to have gone through all this. I'm sure there's a lot of other people who have had some of the same things you had, probably never all of them, that have succumbed and died or are very sick. And I think a lot of people need to really, if something's wrong with you, make sure you find a medical team or professional that'll help you explore what causes it.
I need to say this.
Okay.
Because during the period when I was ready to give up and, ask my wife to hide the keys to the gun safe.
Wow, you actually did that?
Yes, and contemplated the best way out, the most noble way to leave the earth in front of 3 children
Oh,
who
God.
just saw their dad get diagnosed with what their grandma got diagnosed with, and my children were afraid of her because of her appearance.
Oh.
Well, right,
So you
to
didn't know
get
that you
hit,
were going to end up like
to get
that.
hit with that in your mid-40s, it changes things. And so
Right.
at the time, at the period when I was like that, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not gonna refill my pills. I'm just gonna, your wife is like, okay, he's giving up. So she recommended ketamine infusions for depression. And I went down to a place in Dallas, I want to say this was 2018, and it was new idea. And their protocol was one hour infusion, 6 weeks in a row. Okay, and keep in mind the condition I told you I was in at this point. I was still miserable, physically. I was in a lot of pain, just surgeries, infections, and so I go through this 6-week program, and at the end of it, with kind of like, okay, my wife and I are sitting down with the ketamine infusion center place with the doc, and well, hey, how you doing? Like, how you feeling? Is it any better? And I'm like, no, I'm in fucking pain constantly. I'm not sleeping through the night, and this and that. And my wife just gives me this look, and she's like, are you kidding me? She's like, the boys got their father back. Like, you told jokes for the first time in a year.
Wow.
Like, your sarcasm came back. You might be in a whole lot of pain and not sleeping, but it made changes. So then, during another rough period, we went back to ketamine infusions, where it was a more condensed treatment with macro dosing over the course of 4 hours, 4 straight days, instead of 6 one-hour infusions spread out over 6 weeks. And I can look you in the eye right now and tell you that there's no way in hell that I would be here today without the ketamine infusions and the state of mind and my ability to understand that manageable pain existed. Without those, and I think I did one 6-week program and 3 sets of 4-day infusions through that period. So one thing we're adding, hopefully moving on in the future, is hallucinogenic clinics with access to ketamine and psilocybin for severe clinical depression, and making that accessible to the public and making it more mainstream, really, because I've been utilizing that ever since. Ever since getting off the SSRIs, after being on them routine and consistently for so long, and being in the place where I am, knowing that it's attainable without drugs, coming out the other end without relying upon RX to change your brain chemistry to reduce the depression in your life.
And that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, for people to not have to go through all that you went through.
Big piece of the puzzle.
To start with the microcurrent, to add that if needed to. And you also, those compression boots you have are pretty wonderful. And then you have this.
So yeah, we use a lot of tools. It's, we use Avicen machine, which heats up the blood from the palm, and the pressurized cuff releases the blood into your bloodstream, and upon doing so, it's supposed to go in and open up the small capillaries, which smallest capillaries exist in the ligaments and tendons. So we already know that my ligaments and tendons are calcified completely, or
can they ever come back?
Well, right. So that's what we're doing. I mean, that's where I stand before you today. My range of motion is increased, but I mean, I can swing a golf club. I can ski for 5 hours.
And there was, with all the joint issues and problems
with
and
all that going on,
it's amazing.
I can move far. I can't.
Are you in pain when you swing a golf club?
At first, yeah. And sure.
At first of the day, you mean?
I think I dislocated my right shoulder twice in 18 holes.
And you just pop it back in.
And then I'll take the next hole off, and I'll sit in the cart and enjoy myself. And then I'll try a wedge, and then I'll do a driver off the next hole. I mean, I only got back for 1 round of golf before I dislocated my hip, but that was a goal of mine. Was as soon as I got the first hip replacement, I was never able to get back to a golf swing, so I went 7 years without golf. And so as I went through all these surgeries, it was stem cells. It was like, if you can get me to the point where I have enough flexibility to rotate my spine and enough balance to stand over a golf ball and make a turn, and enough coordination to strike a white ball with a club face.
A lot of coordination.
If you can get me to that point, I'm on cloud 9.
Yeah.
So while I can't shoot a basketball or throw a frisbee or go bowling, I can ski. I can ski without falling. If I fall, I'm screwed. And no doubt, I'll dislocate something, break something.
So do you stay on the blues or?
No, hell no.
Oh,
no.
pardon me. Pardon me.
So my vision. So at first, I bought the insurance on the Icon Pass when I got here, thinking I was going to blow out on day one. And then after realizing that the hardest part was walking in the ski boots to get there, and then getting undercut by a low chairlift, were the most dangerous things on the mountain for me. So being blind in the right eye and glaucoma in both, my depth perception is horrible. So if it's gray, I can't ski. There's no shadows. If I can't tell the conditions in front of me and I lose my weight going over the front of my skis, whereas somebody who doesn't have my orthopedic condition would just fall, get some snow, I'll dislocate a shoulder and maybe a tibia.
You have to come
and
back.
I'll dislocate a knee. I'll dislocate a hip. And so I have to ski when I'm in complete control of what's in front of me. So there's no powder days. I don't know what's underneath the powder.
Right,
and
exactly.
So if I lose,
you go out first in the morning when it's fresh grooms.
If it's groomers and it's sunny, I'm out there.
Nice.
And I'll ski for 5 straight hours, something you're not supposed to be able to do on a knee with cartilage. And
5 straight hours.
I'm able to get out there and do it.
That's awesome.
I started, of course, getting competitive with it. So I think my most vertical feat that I did in one day was 38,000. And it was like 5 hours on the mountain and like almost 3 hours of run time.
Wow.
And yeah, so with the help of microcurrent and compression boots, I'll get off the mountain. And of course, a knee in that condition is going to be swollen. It's going to be tight. Range of motion is
Do you
going to be
ice
decreased.
it and
No,
elevate?
I don't know. I go do compression boots and I
Okay.
do microcurrent
Okay.
and I'll put plates on my knee and plates on my lumbar. So back-to-back summers, 20 and 21, I had a bilateral rhizotomy, L2 through S1. So they cauterize the nerves on both sides. So it's basically like getting an epidural, because when that pain is debilitating, I can't get to my doctor's appointments. I can't
Wow.
get in the car.
You can't, you don't move.
I can't straighten my body and get out of bed and walk upright.
And it has to be
Right,
excruciating.
and so they cauterized the nerves, which were supposed to give me like 12 to 18 months of relief. And so the first one was in July of 20, so I could do all these surgeries. And then the next one was in July of 21, because like at 11 and a half months, it started to flare up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in and repeated the procedure. And I haven't had one done since.
Nice.
And that's been 2 ski seasons.
And meanwhile, you're probably healing from the microcurrent. Nice.
Right,
Nice.
so I'll go in and I'll do, 45 minutes of microcurrent on myself and throw the compression boots on and then go out the next day. So of course I tried to go back-to-back days and, all that stuff. And as soon as the conditions make me play defense up there, I'm off the mountain. So, but that's where I'm at right now. Like I said, able to live my life, but very limited orthopedically with what I can do, but grateful for everything I can do.
And your story is so amazing and it's inspirational. And now you're bringing microcurrent. You brought it to Steamboat, basically.
Yeah, well,
Now
I
you're
moved
making
here,
it
didn't have
available.
one. So when I moved here, I had done 10 rounds of cobalt chelation with Dr. Rector. We had originally predicted that we would need 20, but based on where my levels were at when I moved here, he determined that I would need another 14 at least.
Wow.
So that's where I found Dr. Phaedra Fegley
Uh-huh.
to take on my case after I'd been passed around, took it to one person and he's out of my league. Have you talked to so-and-so?
He's out
And
of
then
my
I go to
league.
someone else, and
They
then
couldn't
like,
even
yeah, I
deal
don't
with
need to do
you.
this. And then, have you met Dr. Fegley yet? So that's how I met Dr. Fegley.
Uh-huh.
And so she resumed the chelation. And so I arranged for appointments with her, with Dr. Christensen and Dr. Rector back in Dallas, because here I am talking to doctor into putting chemicals in my body, and she's never done it before. Here I am, crazy guy, like, hey, got a
And
cool
she's
story.
here.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. She's a Steamboat.
And so as we were doing the chelation, the 3 things that I went without that were the main players were hyperbaric chambers, which we're going to be adding to the clinic, by the way,
Oh, really?
and cryotherapy and microcurrent. Those were the
Cryotherapy is cold?
yeah, that's just the cryo chambers. While I liked some of its attributes, going without that is not what made the difference. And while I love hyperbaric, hyperoxygenating everything is huge, massive health benefits from that. But from a detox standpoint and the nervous system stuff, I'm thinking, okay, microcurrent, electricity, nervous system.
Yeah.
I'm having nervous system dysfunction as I'm continuing chelation without the added help of microcurrent. And all the doctors, from the metals doc to the molds doc, told me to slow the F down because I was going to hurt myself or kill myself by detoxing so fast.
Oh.
Okay, but I was
Yeah.
using the microcurrent.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm continuing the same protocol with the chelation minus the support with the microcurrent. And that was the decision to buy a machine. And so I bought a machine for personal use. I invited my doctor, the guy who owned the chiropractic clinic, a former teammate, massage therapist, Rolfer, to the first training session. And based on their response, it's grown to what it's grown to, where we keep having miracles every week, pretty much, where we're bringing back movement to limbs that haven't moved in 8 years after one treatment.
One of the most stunning ones was a tennis pro in town. I don't know
Yes.
if you want to mention his name or not, but he couldn't open his hand all the way.
Yes, a good friend of mine, John Aragon, suffers from arthritis in his hands and severe long COVID symptoms where he lost sense of taste and sense of smell for a while, almost a year, and severe brain fog and rheumatoid. And within a couple days, within one treatment, we took away his brain fog and his loss of his loss of taste and smell.
He got his sense of taste?
Very
back?
next morning, he
Wow.
flipped
the
out.
Next morning.
He flipped out when he smelled coffee and tasted
And
it.
how long had it been since he had
A
lost?
year.
A year.
A year.
So long COVID.
And the brain
symptoms,
fog
that's
gone.
huge.
The brain fog gone. And then after a couple hand treatments, he got sensation back to pinky and ring, I think, that had lost sensation. and he was able to straighten his hands for the first time in many years.
In many years.
Many years.
That's
Yeah,
a miracle.
got it. He's in his early 70s, I
He
believe.
is? I didn't know, yeah.
I think
That's really young.
late 60s, early 70s. John, I'm sorry, John.
That's
Love
all
you,
right.
buddy. But he's made, you know, such a turnaround that he's able to get out there and do the things that we have to do here in Steamboat, like shovel snow, use the chainsaw, chop wood, and he's been able to get back and do those things where
Wow.
he went years without.
That's amazing.
And so yeah, we've been having, like I said, I watched it. Well, I witnessed it on myself and how others responded to me. But now I get to be on the other end and respond to others, and I'm like, what? I told you.
Don't you love it? That
I'm
must
like-
be so
I'm
satisfying.
like, did I not tell you what happened to my knee? Like, you're barking about tennis elbow, and you're asking if it
Right,
can help.
tennis elbow.
And I'm telling you that my knee has literally 0% cartilage left in it, multi-compartmental with calcified ligaments. I was like, I have this MRI report to show you that, like, you don't know of somebody with a worse knee than mine because it would have been replaced. Like, all of my joints are comparable of your average 80-year-old.
So can we talk for a moment about microcurrent and what it does? It's a trillionth of an amp?
So
Or-
yeah, it delivers frequency to the body at a trillionth of an amp, which is the same amp.
Just so small.
It's the same amp that you're generating a trillionth of an amp right now as you sit here next to me.
Like
Okay.
every organ
That
in my
is-
body,
that
every
is your-
blood vessel, everything that's happening
Your
is
body
powered by
runs
that.
off of electricity at a trillionth of an amp.
Okay.
So when frequencies are introduced at a trillionth of an amp, they can affect it at the cellular level. Like the cell is receiving a command from the brain through your nervous system to detox, to get rid of inflammation, to get rid of scar tissue. And that's where, when you look at me, as you stated earlier, my appearance at age 49, you know, having gone through over 20 surgeries since 2015, and to have all these neuropathic and cognitive conditions since then, I don't appear that.
No.
All of the stuff that should be on the outside based on what's on the inside is simply not there. And that's where people who know what they're looking at when they look at my brain imaging and they're like, Brandon, you had dying tissue in your brain. Like, it was brain damage. We weren't sure what was causing it, but you had brain damage.
They could see like
The key letter being
necrosis kind of.
the key letter being D. You had the. Okay? But now it's
Had.
back and functioning, and it's playing ping pong with dopamine back and forth.
Wow.
And
The body wants to heal.
Right.
You give it the right materials and input.
And that is where I bought a machine. I treated myself. I winged it. I ran electricity through every part of my body, through my eyes, through my optic nerve. I treated my 2-week-old son. He's 1 now. He came home from the hospital with a respiratory infection at week 2. Still at the tail end of people wearing masks at the hospital for COVID. And he was on oxygen for almost a month, but we were able to keep him off antibiotics, and I treated him. I put a plate on the back of his chest and took a little finger probe and ran electricity right through his chest cavity.
And we're not recommending anyone try this at home. You have to be
No, I just did it at my home.
right. You have to be trained. You have to really know. I mean, Brandon's been.
I treated my 8.5-month pregnant wife before she gave birth to that 2-week-old who required the microcurrent treatment to give to him. And as I shared it with friends and watched tinnitus go away, watched hearing loss come back, watched sense of
Really? People
sense of
regained hearing?
they would get tinnitus, and then
Right.
and then it would
It's so
sound like they were
loud.
in an echo chamber because we repaired nerve damage in their ear canal.
Wow.
Right, and so we got fingers to move. Like I said, for the first time in 8 years, she lost control of her left hand due to a boating accident, and the propeller almost severed both arms. Several surgeries to save it, and after one 40-minute treatment, she starts moving her thumb, and just goes insane, and then starts moving her other fingers like she's trying to make a fist, and just
She had
one
to
treatment.
freak out.
It happened right in front of me. And it's like, as things like this start to happen, I'm like going, oh yeah, that used to be me. Like, people used to react when I would have
That has
stuff
to
like
be
this.
so satisfying
It was unreal.
to see that.
It's unreal. So I understand. I mean, come on. I dropped out of college early to go play pro baseball as a recreational management major who had aspirations of being a ski patrol. Like, I got no credibility whatsoever when it comes to this. So my whole thing was, well, hey, let's start showing doctors this and let's start giving them my files and go, come on board and join the team.
Yeah.
You know, you have credibility. You have an MD and a PhD and a DO after your name. Like, you look at this and explain this.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't want people to argue with me anymore. All I'm saying is what's happening. Come on board and say, yes, this is actually happening.
And why not try it? It's so non-invasive.
Right. That's the thing.
Why can't it be the first go-to?
That's the thing. Is that that's where
check the mold, check the metals,
right.
and try microcurrent.
Right.
I mean, just those three things that so much suffering could be alleviated because people, like you had no idea what was causing. Here you are playing pro ball and you don't know what's causing it, and the metal can do that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, look, people can blame. It's like with the, well, no, I don't want to talk about the Cobalt case. Other things cause blood clots.
many things cause blood.
Other things cause nervous system dysfunction. Other things cause insomnia. Other things cause ADHD brain on steroids. Other things do cause that. But the fact that I'm that toxic with heavy metals, and heavy metals cause that, if you want to try and pin that on something else, that's on you. Like, if you want to start bringing up other possibilities, that's fine. But I can go back to childhood.
You can, if you've had a history of it.
Right, with the underdeveloped from birth, you know, a grade smaller than everybody else. The oral fixation, it was chronic anxiety, dysfunction symptoms throughout my toddler years. Like, it was there from the get-go. It was there through junior high. It was there through high school. As the exposures started increasing, the symptoms started increasing.
And all this time you had no idea what was causing it.
No
clue at all.
No,
and why would you? Why would you even think of that?
Right.
Amazing. So I'm hoping this will give people hope.
Yeah.
And if you have symptoms, get heavy metal testing and test for mold and do
A
microcurrent.
quarter of the population has one of the variants of the MTHFR gene that's going to make your body store gadolinium, and that is administered anytime somebody is going in for an MRI and it's a suspected tear. I mean, that's what they're looking for. It's a black dye, it's a black radioactive metal that turns the gray portion of the MRI to black, so that when they're looking for a break in the white and it's up against gray, now it's up against black.
They can see the contrast.
Right, the contrast, that's why
so
it's
it's really for their ease of viewing it, and meanwhile they're poisoning
That's
you.
it.
And it's still allowed in this country.
Yes, it is.
And widely used.
EU banned it, like, I don't know, 15 years ago. I called down to Columbia. Of course, I'm like, oh my God! I just did a brain MRI. Did they just shoot gadolinium directly into my brain? And so I called down there to find out if, and the two guys were like, no, dude, we don't use that shit. That stuff's poison.
Really?
Really?
You guys are like freaked out
really?
when you came out.
You guys know about this. Oh yeah, everybody knows about it, but you guys.
That's pretty insulting.
It is what it is.
You wouldn't think that of our country, right?
It is what it is. And like I said, you've got to sign a waiver, and they put a nice little black and orange radioactive warning label on it, and you sign away, and you get doused with gadolinium. And I don't have a response upon administration. I don't. I have a response in the MRI machine. When we did the brain MRI last spring at UC Health here at Steamboat, we had to. Well, I was having memory issues that were just. I couldn't function.
But they didn't use that.
I didn't know that. Well, no, they didn't use gadolinium. But when they did the MRI, we had to stop it at like 15 minutes and pause because my face was purple and I was sweating.
From the MRI?
Right. I hit the panic button and my face was hot, and he came out and he looked at my face and he's like, "Oh shit." And I'm like, "Don't worry, dude. It's just metals." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a long story. So let's let it cool off." And he's like, "Well, we got like 5 minutes left. Do you think you can make it?" I'm like, "Well, let me take a breather and we'll go." Because metal's storing the brain science.
Wait, so when they do the MRI and it's magnetic resonance, it's hitting the metal.
Pulls the metal to the skin.
No.
Yes.
It was detoxing you.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to, but meanwhile it's staying in your body because you have that
Yes.
gene.
Yep.
So it's recirculating back into your tissues.
So when they did so when I dislocated the hip implant, the way the cobalt was leaked in, it was the metal connection between the ball and stem. So it was the threads. It was just like, and so those metal particles were emitting from the ball.
Oh my God.
So there's still cobalt in me.
Right.
So now the ball that I just broke and dislocated has a cobalt head. And so when I dislocated it, I had just tested my first clean cobalt test that spring. And so 3-4 months later, I dislocate the right hip. My tissue is exposed to cobalt for 36 hours before we have the revision done. And I told the surgeon, I'm like, hey, can you run some labs while I'm in here for cobalt? I want to see if my levels are back up. And while they did jump back up, okay, they jumped up to 0.9 per billion. I forget what scale they use. But it was higher than it was in the spring. So even that short exposure of 36 hours to cobalt to my tissue was enough to raise my levels.
But they
cobalt.
took that out, so you didn't have any.
Well, they took right. So they put together the ball. They put in a new ball, and the cobalt still exists, but there's no metal on metal. It's ceramic on metal. So there's no more metal shavings because it's not.
But there's cobalt in the ball, but surrounded by ceramic.
Right. There's cobalt in the stem too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a quad metal.
Do they still use that?
Yes. No. They recalled. No, that's what was recalled in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, but they still use metal heads, but there is no titanium, and there is no metal on metal.
You know what metal is approved to use now? I'm just curious if you don't know that.
I
stuff.
don't. If
Yeah.
anybody were to tell me they were going to put more metal in my body, I'd probably research it.
Absolutely.
But I don't.
That's another thing.
I
People
don't.
should research things.
Yeah. But if I went down every rabbit hole prior to it happening, it might take a while.
You've gone down enough.
Yeah.
You've gone down enough.
Yeah.
Brandon, thank you so much, and I'm so excited you've taken over the spa in town, and you've made it more than a spa now. You have Microcurrent. You have that wonderful, I call it the M room, the membership room, where you have the boots, the compression boots, and the Avocent machine, which I'm not sure I understand everything yet, but I'm learning. And I know, I'll tell you one thing that I've had some really incredible results I feel from Microcurrent. One thing that I noticed right away was I could taste food better.
Yeah.
The
You'll see a lot.
taste of food was, and I'm a foodie, so that was a pleasure.
We encourage people to notice changes. It's not necessarily positive right off the bat. For instance, acidic armpit sweat. Like, toxins are leaving your body. It's not pleasant, but it's something you'll notice when we do microcurrent, where it's going to drain your lymphs, it's going to drain your tissue, and it's got to get out somehow. And through the pores.
Microcurrent drains your lymph tissue?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, let me tell you, I haven't even told you this.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I took a golf lesson for the first time. I haven't picked a golf club up in decades, maybe 30 years.
Really?
Yeah. My
Nice.
whole family was obsessed, so I kind of went the other way.
Okay.
But I'm playing in a business tournament on the 13th, in 2 weeks. So I don't want to be ridiculous. I want to make sure my swing's okay. And I took a lesson yesterday. I did really well. And I have to tell you what, I think I did really well because I think my body's in better shape because of microcurrent. I think the connectivity, I'm thinking better. And when I went to practice putting last night, my first putt went in the hole, right away. That was the only putt that went right in the hole. But it was I really feel sharper, clearer, and I really think the microcurrent had an impact. So I was I'm in fairly good shape anyway. I train with a trainer and I exercise, but the golf thing, just all those emotions, that's a lot of movement to put together, a lot of things you have to think about in a golf swing. And I just feel I don't think I would have come to it this quickly.
Yeah.
I felt like I was really getting it quickly, and I'm not exactly, in my 20s anymore. I'm decades beyond that.
No,
so I was really excited about that.
My path with golf was, we got the twilight, we got the last tee time of the day. I'm out with my 11 and 7-year-old at the time, who have never golfed before, only on the range, never on the course. And you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to go out there and hit a wedge, from 100 and let them have some fun and do whatever.
Take
Just
your time
swing the
around
club
the
a few
course.
times. I maybe took like 3 driver swings. It hurt like hell. You know, I enjoyed the hell out of it. Cried several times. It was a goal of mine. Like to be out there with my boys, if you can just get me out to enjoy golf with my kids. That was like the thing. And I got out and I did it for 9 holes. And I go back to my 11U's baseball team that I'm coaching. And of course I'm bragging to the dads like, hey man, I got out there. Yeah. Oh, it hurts like hell. My back is done. My shoulders are ripped apart. Back of my shoulders were just, because I can't, there's no external and no internal.
Wow.
It's frozen shoulder.
Yeah.
It doesn't
and
go.
You're still doing
and
it.
so, but golf is one of those things where you can keep the elbows in and still be okay, because I can't flare them. And so it was just tearing at my rotator. And so one of the dads says to me, hey man, that's awesome. I got an open spot in our foursome next Friday at Haymaker if you want to join us. And I looked at him and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna, like, this hurts like bad. I can't do shit. I was like, so I'm gonna make that my next goal is to like get ready for Friday. And so I did microcurrent. This is still when I had a machine at home, so I could treat myself for hours every day. And I played it up everywhere that hurt. I played it up my shoulders, I played it up my back, I played it up my left knee. And the day came, and I go out there, and I warm up on the driving range, and I'm like, okay, it feels a little better. So by like the 2nd or 3rd hole, I feel like I can make a free, easy turn. And back before I got done with all this, you know, I was a long ball guy. I was, 125 mile an hour club head speed, bought the special club to beat the, and I was carrying, 340 and rolling out to 370. But wild, but enjoy just hitting the shit out of the ball. So I get out there, and on the 3rd hole, I decide I'm going to let one rip. And I think it probably went about 300. And the dad on the team looks at me like, okay, that was cool.
What the heck?
And so then the next, like a couple holes later, he's like, it's a par 5, there's a bunker on the left, and he goes, hey, it's like, we got a little tailwind. He goes, see if you can clear that bunker. I'm like, okay. So I haul off and I whack one, and we get out there, and it was like, 350. And so, while, yes, I probably lost a dozen golf balls during that round. I snap hooked them, I bladed them over the, out of bounds and couldn't find them, but I was able to make a turn on the ball that could contact it with that much.
And have fun. That must have been so much fun.
Oh, it was a blast. And then, like 2 weeks later, I dislocated the hip at the gym last August. And so I haven't been back on a golf course since, but it's another goal of mine. Right now, no. My body would not be able to swing anything beyond a half wedge swing. But I hope to get back to a full swing by the end of the summer. And that's what microcurrent does, is as I treat my back, as I treat my shoulders, the function and range of motion start to get better, coordination and balance start to improve.
It has so many effects.
Yeah.
It just sets everything the way it should be.
Yeah.
I think we should close now. We covered a lot of material, and I thank you so much. I think anyone listening to this will get a lot of education and a lot of inspiration, because you've been through more than anyone I've ever met in their life with things that happened to you, and the way you've taken them on. You've just been so proactive and taken it on yourself to learn and find the experts who can help you. That's huge. Yeah. But it should be hope, give other people hope that they could do it too. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's like fall out of my seat.
All right.
Oh, my legs are